bustling medieval town crowded with adventurers. The main character is Red Dixon. The black-haired young man is a member of the C-rank guild Black Wolves. At 25, he left the royal capital and moved to another city to become an adventurer. Now at 30, he has been stuck at rank F for 5 years. A merchant offered to buy the young man some fresh vegetables, but he has to go. Not a strong fighter, the young man looks away thoughtfully and suddenly notices something. A little girl fell to the ground and cried because her knees hurt. 2 children turned to her, noting she was dragging herself as usual and had fallen. They told her to wait while they called for help and said they would be back soon. Scratching his head, the boy noticed the girl had fallen, approached her, sat down, and politely asked if he could look at her knees, and the girl, tearful, was surprised to see her uncle and agreed. The young man placed his hand on her knees and used a recovery technique. The girl looked surprised and smiled, saying it didn't hurt at all. Putting a finger to his lips, the young man smiled, winked, and told the girl to say nothing to anyone, and she agreed happily. The boy has a rare set of skills and restoration magic, while a satisfied girl thanks her uncle and says goodbye as he leaves and waves back. Walking down the street past people, he opens the small bag on his belt and pulls out a bottle for a quick drink. The man wonders why Jill suddenly invited him to a bar without inviting Aisha, and he thinks she wants to talk about the upcoming guild promotion to rank B as he walks down the street. After a while, the protagonist meets a young man named Jill, leader of the Black Wolves Guild, who sits at the bar smiling and gently asks Red if he could stop working for them. Gil's smile falls as he asks again what seems strange, confused by Red's surprise, and saying he's trying to be polite and not rude, points at the young man in front of him and says he's fired. Rita stands and asks Gil how this could have happened so suddenly, and his interlocutor tells him it was not so sudden because their guild, Jet Black Wolves, had risen from rank C to rank B. The young man asks again if he heard it right and what it means, since he cannot believe what's happening. The guild leader tells him to decide for himself. He can't carry ballast with him all the time, especially when ballast is dragging him down. Red asks if he won't even accept being an assistant. Fed up, Jill slams her mug on the table, spilling her drink. He stares at the man angrily and tells him they've been working on themselves since they were young, since they were 20, just like him, and says helping has no rank, so he should leave quietly. They also take back everything they gave him, which surprised Red, and Jill says that when someone moves up a rank, former B-rank guilds give their equipment to newcomers, and Red will not accept those items for a challenge. Rita asks them to wait, and looking at Jill, objects that he won't be able to act like a hero. Jill smiles widely and asks him again what hero. With a disgusted look, he says he will not become one and that he should go home to his farm and work there. Rita jumps up, stunned by the news, slams his hand on the table, then brings it to his chest and exhales heavily. He said goodbye to Gil and received an unpleasant comment about how useless Red was. After he leaves, his now former guild leader keeps drinking and laughing and says that without him, they will definitely end up at B rank. After Gil laughs loudly and the bartender thanks him and tells him to come again, the dejected young man leaves and Red walks sadly down the city's night street. At the meeting, the girl recognizes him and calls his name. Linda surprises him and their eyes meet. Linda, his girlfriend, looks surprised and asks if he left the adventure as guild. They stand in the middle of the street. Linda tells the young man he is no longer an adventurer and will not be able to earn money anymore. He agrees. Her expression changes. She looks down at him and tells him she doesn't need him anymore and that they are breaking up. Surprised, he asks again how they could break up, and she shakes her head and answers with an insult. Tossing her hair back, she says a man without money doesn't deserve her attention and dating him is a waste of time. The man looks at her in confusion, tells her she never thought that way before, reminds her he did everything for her, and asks if she had been with him only for the money. Linda replies confidently that it's natural only rich men can be with a woman this beautiful. Rita says he wanted to help because she owed money to her parents. Laughing, she even asked him again if he had really fallen for it, then said she had not seen her parents in many years. Shocked, the young man realized she had lied to him and asked why she had done it. Linda walked up to the man, looked him straight in the eye and said, of course, it was all about the money. She then turned and waved to Red to say goodbye because she had a date. The still shocked young man asked who her date was. Smiling, she said she'd be with a man who has money because, unlike the other man, he's also an adventurer. Red tried to stop her, but she didn't turn around and simply told him not to talk to her anymore. He stayed where he was and kept calling her, but she walked away. Turning around, he left dejected. Morning light fills the room, the sun high in the sky, and birds fly past Red's window as he lies on his bed. Empty glass bottles lie on the floor nearby, clanking against each other. the remains have been poured onto the floor. Opening his eyes and unsure if it was morning, he sat on the edge of the bed, clutched his aching head, saw the bottles of sock, and remembered what happened the day before. Former guild leader Gil and ex-girlfriend Linda appear before him, laughing, and he grins, surprised he can laugh even in this situation. The man stood up, slapped his cheeks, took off his shirt, and stepped into the shower to freshen up, ready to start looking for a new job. At the Adventurers Guild in the royal capital, the hero arrives in his healer's outfit to look for a job he can do. After startling Red, a worker spoke to him from behind and said they had been waiting for him. She smiled. The boy turns and recognizes Sierra, who smiles, invites him in through the back door, then asks him respectfully to tell his story, and he agrees. Sierra, a staff member at the Royal Capital Adventurers Guild headquarters, sits at the table, shakes her head in disbelief, asks why Jill made such a foolish mistake, and reads the words with surprise. She says Jill is wrong, that their guild will accept Red, and offers to promote the Black Wolves Guild to rank B, leaving Red surprised again. Sierra explains that Red is a humble adventurer who can use recovery magic and carries a bag of items. The guy waves it off and says recovery magic alone isn't enough, explaining his bag is only needed to carry luggage. Sierra sighs heavily, hanging her head. Aware of the situation, she says she wanted to be kind to Rita and is sorry that others treated him so badly, but looking at him, she still says both the restoration magic and the bag of items are rare. A worker says that if it weren't for the troublesome Black Wolves Guild, the adventurer's rank would be higher, and Redo dismisses the claim as nonsense. Sierra loses her composure, jumps up, and tells the boy he doesn't value himself at all. The modest young man says he came to the guild today to look for a new job. Shocked, Sierra apologizes for not being able to help and looks worried, then shows everything they have to offer as the worker spreads the ads on the table and points to the groups looking for a healer, placing them in front of the man. A man reads a completed form that says Count Rodenwald from the city of Amorta is looking for immigrants. Surprised, he asks the worker about it, and she apologizes, saying it was an ad seeking new immigrants and they mixed everything up again. Red thinks of Amorta, a city not far from the royal capital, and reflects that he left his city to start over in the royal capital. To Sierra's surprise, he says he will go to Amort while pointing at the announcement. Night falls over a camp set up outside the city. A fire crackles as a young man sits on a large boulder in front of it. Retta sips a hot drink and says the night is still cold despite the approach of spring. He remembers Sarah doing everything to keep him, giving him a letter of recommendation for the Amorta Guild because a friend worked in the city's guild, and arranging for Amorta to take the young man halfway. Carefully, Rita put his hand into the item bag and decided he would cook a fatty piece of beef for dinner today. Knowing the bag will keep raw meat from spoiling during travel, he smiles at the meat. Then he took out butter, milk, vegetables, salt, pepper, and bread, saying that's it. He set a frying pan over the fire and began frying raw meat. A starry night sky provided the backdrop as an owl called in the distance. Surprised, the young man asked what else was there, saw a girl hiding behind a rock, looked toward her, asked who she was, and told her to come out. She walked barefoot over the stones with her hands pressed to her chest and looked out quietly, startling in her red presence. Under the moonlight, the girl stared with lifeless eyes, dirty and wearing torn clothes. Rita closed the bag, surprised and wondering why the girl was in rags, and asked if she had a mother or father. The girl shook her head. The young man thought it was madness that a small child stood alone in the wilderness and asked again if she was hungry or wanted to eat with her uncle, but the girl stayed silent. Red smiled and beckoned, saying come on, asked if she was cold, said he was lonely, and hoped she would have dinner with him. Fear made the girl look at the boy, her stomach growling, and under the starry sky she began walking toward Red's camp. Wrapped in the cloak the young man had given her, the girl sat eating quietly by the crackling fire while he kept cooking, cutting meat in a frying pan and thinking she must be very hungry. Her stomach still growled after eating, which caught the guy's attention and made their eyes meet. Red smiled, handed her a piece of meat, and said she could have more because it had been saved for her. She looked at him while holding a spoonful of food. Eventually the food cups were empty and set aside, and the girl awkwardly thanked for the food, while the young man replied with a warm welcome. After they finished dinner, Rida introduced himself to the girl, hesitantly saying he was like an adventurer, and sat down in front of her. Mina answered, looking into the boy's eyes and sitting beside him, holding the gifted cloak as her eyes came alive. The boy asked if she had a home or anywhere to go. Mina shook her head. He thought for a moment, closed his eyes and put his hand to his chin, then looked at her and said she could come with him. Tossing a log into the fire, Rita said he was heading from here to the city of Amort and would stop in a small town on the way, and the girl asked hesitantly if that was true, and he smiled to confirm. Seeing her bruised, scratched legs, he asked if they hurt and said he could heal them if he could touch them. Mina noticed and said he had no medicine. He sat down, took her legs, smiled, and said he could do without them, then spoke to heal her wounds and used a bright light to restore them. Surprised and pleased, Mina looked at her legs and said it didn't hurt anymore. Then she thanked the guy but forgot his name, and Rada reminded her with a smile. She smiled and echoed his thanks. Then he gave Mina a cup of tea with honey to warm her, and they fell asleep together in a small tent under a blanket. The next day the wheels of a wooden cart rattle. Mina is glad to have met such a kind man as Red, and Red says he is even more glad. The cart driver turns to the boy and says a village is visible ahead. Perched on a hill, they overlook the whole village of Morelia with its wide streets and wooden houses. Reaching the village tavern, Red and Mina thank the people for helping them on their way and receive good wishes in return. In front of the tavern, they meet an old man who laughs and asks what brought the father and daughter to this god of Seiken City. The old man says his name is Raz Morelia and that he is the mayor of this small town, and the boy introduces himself, says they will be here for a few days, and that a handshake will not leave him indebted, and the old man agrees. The mayor notices the girl is dirty, especially when he sees her feet and hair, and asks if she stepped in a puddle by accident. He says they can bathe at his daughter's hotel and walk down the road to a grandmother's store to buy clothes and shoes, and the young man thanks her for her kindness. The old man winked and laughed and said that although the town was small, the people were friendly, the food was delicious, and they could always rest here. After a while, the mayor's daughter meets them while cleaning and welcomes them to the Sparrow Feathers Hotel. Rita and Mina say they would like to stay the night, and the owner, noticing the girl, says they need to take a bath. The mayor's daughter opens the shoe cabinet and says room 201 is on the second floor, and that 2 silver coins will get them a room with food. Taking the boots, she approaches the visitors and gives Red the boots, explaining he can't go shopping barefoot, and that she'll lend him shoes after his bath so they can go to the store with their daughter. Retta and timid Mina thank the girl. Once Mina climbs off his shoulders, Retta asks if she will take a bath, and Mina agrees. Rita looks up, then down at Mina and asks to bathe alone. Mina looks away and, embarrassed, protests that she is not a little girl anymore. In the bathroom, the girl took off her clothes and carefully placed them in the basket inside the cabinet. The girl opened the door and stepped into the bath, clearly happy and saying she had not had a bath in a long time. Mina took a bath, first scrubbing her back with a brush, then pouring cold water over herself, and after washing she sat in the water. She looked at her hand, began to think father and daughter, and felt a little embarrassed. After her bath she told Rida she had finished washing while he sat at the table drinking hot tea, apologized for being a burden, and he replied that it was fine and offered to buy her clothes and shoes. The innkeeper wishes them a safe journey and tells Mina to ask him to buy her the most beautiful clothes. Mina, embarrassed at the door, asks again, and Ridu waves her hand and says they are leaving. They soon reach the store, and greeting them, Grandma hears Red say he wants to buy clothes and shoes and notices the adventurer, the parent, and the daughter. Startled by the girl's ragged clothes, the saleswoman asks the man if he has any spare clothes, and Rana awkwardly says no while Mina hides behind him. The grandmother hurried over to the clothes in the display windows and asked them to wait a minute while she looked for something suitable. After picking up the items, she goes over and shows the dress, explaining it is made from a single piece of fabric so it will be comfortable and easy for travel, then offers to try it on. Mina grabbed her things and ran to the fitting room. After the girl left, grandmother asked Rida what was wrong, and he, shaking his head, said he hoped to find someone in town who knew the girl. The saleswoman says she has never seen the girl here, even though it's a small town where everyone knows each other, and the man understandably agrees. Mina finishes changing, peeks out from behind the fitting room curtain and calls him, then steps out and shyly asks him how she looks. Pushed by his grandmother, Red says she is beautiful and that it suits her. Vina is happy. The guy, seeing her, thought it was cute and did not expect things to go so far. Smiling brightly, the grandmother asks Mina what she wants to try on next. Mina asks again in surprise, and the saleswoman explains she is a traveler, so one outfit will not be enough. Smiling, Rita patted the girl on the head and told his grandmother to try choosing an outfit Mina would like. After finding a new outfit, she went to the dressing room, and when she came out she approached Red, hoping he would like it, and asked how he liked the outfit. Grandma said it suited her very well. After changing again, Mina spun in front of Red and her grandmother and asked how they liked her new outfit. The man said it was wonderful, then he and his grandmother smiled and suggested another outfit, which shocked Mina. The happy grandmother said she would pick out another set of clothes, and he would thank her when he saw the new outfit in front of him. As evening fell, Mina and Rida walked home after shopping. Rida offered to carry her bags, but she shook her head. Embarrassed, she looked at the guy holding a bag of things, then turned to Rita. He looked at her and asked what was wrong. Mina smiled warmly and thanked them sincerely, saying she would treasure the clothes. Retta, pleased, wished her good health and said they'd have dinner back at the hotel. They arrived at a large house with a sign that said hotel, sat at the table, and thanked the people for the food. The happy girl said the steak was great. Red said he'd heard demon pigs were a local dish, so he'd never eaten that meat before. The innkeeper replied it was their specialty. Collecting the empty plates from their table onto a tray, she turned to the heroes and said their demon pigs were the best in the city. After putting the dishes behind the counter, the hotel owner said they had been having problems lately, and hearing noise from the street, turned toward the exit. The hotel owner heard it too, turned, took the bandage off her hair, and ran to the exit, saying she would go see what was going on there. Red also stood up and went to the exit to see what was happening on the street, and he was surprised when he looked out. He saw many wounded people, including a grandmother and the city mayor, who shouted that he would fetch potions from the warehouse, and a girl urging the wounded to hold on. Red leaves the hotel and looks around, seeing how many people are wounded, and Mina asks what is wrong with them while residents help the wounded. Wounded villagers on the carts are given painkillers, and Red notices, indicating some are in serious condition. Putting on gloves, he approaches the wounded, identifies himself as a healer, and offers a small restorative spell to help them. Surprised, the mayor's daughter watches the man tell Mina to stay at the hotel, then runs after him and says she will go with him. Redo goes to the innkeeper and offers to help the seriously wounded, and the innkeeper points to the cart and says he is there. A man approaches a cart where another man lies gravely injured, and a grandmother beside him says they cannot help, since Red is restorative magic and cannot fix a torn abdominal cavity. Touching the man's stomach, he says excitedly he will try using the restoration anyway. Mina goes to her grandmother and asks what happened to the man. She brought medicine, painkillers, and disinfectants. The grandmother thinks of Mina. He explains they were suddenly attacked by a pack of demon wolves, which also attacked their demon pigs. Mina gives the medicine to her grandmother. The man who came to his senses speaks with difficulty, saying he tried to get rid of the wolf demon, but it attacked him and he hopes they will help him, while Rita, surprised he had come to his senses, immediately asked him not to talk. Worried, Red began to suspect he could not close the wound, so he needed to learn advanced recovery magic for situations like that. Trying his best, he said that since he had failed the first time, he would keep casting the restoration spell until he succeeded, repeating it 3 times in a row. Surprised, the man said he no longer felt any pain, and then took off the bandage to check his stomach, noting his wounds had healed. The grandmother was stunned to see how he had healed such severe injuries. Weary Rita stood before the grateful man. Turning to the saleswoman, he explained it was basic restoration magic, then asked who was next while using the wind of purification spell on his hands. A villager called him over and said 4 people were seriously wounded. Beside him, a grandmother asked for help for her son. Mina folded her arms and wished Red luck. He waved to her and went to the other wounded. After a while, he used the restoration again, held the man's crippled hand, and said this was the last one. The man jerked his hand back, checked that nothing else hurt, bowed to Red and thanked him several times, while Red, tired, wiped sweat from his forehead until the mayor of the city called to him. As he turned, many villagers bowed to him in thanks, and the mayor said he could not thank him enough for saving the village's young men. Surprised, Red raised his hands and told them to lift their heads because he was doing what he was supposed to do. The mayor approached the boy, apologized that the city treasury held only 500 silver coins, and hoped it would be enough for Red. Red was surprised at so much money for ordinary first aid and said he would not accept it. The mayor asked if the man was joking, since even for first aid there were many wounded, and he would have charged 2,000 silver coins for that work. Red became even more shocked, and the saleswoman, grandmother, suggested he might be a priest or a healer and asked if he knew how much they charge for treatment. Red put his hand behind his head and explained he usually treated minor injuries and didn't pay attention to the cost. Mina hugged him with a smile. The innkeeper said few people could use recovery magic, so it was rare, and magic treatment cost several times more than potions. The mayor shook his head, said not to mention healing a dying person, and asked how much it would cost if Retta became their priest and healer. Grandma said that even if he could use basic recovery magic, adventurers would want to recruit him immediately, which would surprise Red. Understanding Sira's point, the boy offered to pay for tonight's lodging, but the villagers shook their heads and said that would not stop them from thanking him. Mina tugged Red's sleeve and when their eyes met, told him they'd come back and pay for the night. The mayor looked at them and realized. He said that whenever the two of them came to Morelia, all their food and accommodation would be free. A joyful Mina smiled and praised Red, which caught him off guard. He said this was a huge reward for him and asked to go on a hike tomorrow to kill the demon wolves. After thinking it over, the mayor said it was worth going because they could kill all the cattle and the demonic pigs, then attack the city, which he would not allow. Retta volunteered to go with them, which surprised the mayor, who asked whether the boy was sure. Stroking the girl's hair, he said he and Mina were going to Mart, and he didn't want her to attack them on the way. Retta also said he didn't think this adventure would hold him back, and although he rarely used it, he still learned some attack magic. The mayor smiled and said using restoration magic would be enough to make everyone feel safe. Rita and the mayor shook hands, both saying they were glad to have met. After a while he returned to his hotel room, stretched, and said he was very tired. Mina had worked hard today, and seeing how much better he felt after the bath, she thanked Rida in return. Crawling into bed under the blanket, the girl called to Red, and when the guy looked at her and asked what happened, she pulled the blanket over her face and said he was cool today. Embarrassed, Rida blushed, put his hand behind his head, and thanked Mina. Then he stepped up to the glowing sphere, touched it, and told the girl it was time for bed. After extinguishing the sphere, the boy wished good night, the girl wished them sweet dreams, and they went to bed. Early the next morning, armed young men gathered in the street and talked while birds sang. The assembled Red stepped forward, greeted everyone, and they urged him to take command. Firmly, he said the demonic wolves must be destroyed. Everyone agreed. Near the city, the squad was attacked by demonic wolves. The warriors surrounded the carts and defended them. A young magician with a large wound on her leg apologized that her right leg was completely paralyzed. A man turned and noticed Fifa's wound. Cursing, the sword-wielding warrior asks what the demonic wolves are doing near the town. Then the warrior shouts for everyone to hear that they must protect the employer and his carriage. Faith bandaged her leg to stop the bleeding. On the cart, the archer says the fur is so tough arrows can't penetrate it, and the swordsman warns it will end badly if it continues. Turning to the wounded girl, he asks whether she can use her magic now. Breathing heavily, Fifa says she still can and calls to the fire spirit holding her staff and spellbook. Swinging his staff, he casts a fire bolt and orders the fire spirit to burn his enemies to ashes. Multiple blows hit the demon wolf, one striking its eye, but it isn't killed. Fafen realizes this is bad, since one shot won't kill him, and turns again to the spirit of fire. Angry at the girl, the wolf ran past the warrior and attacked her, catching the swordsman off guard. Fifa, with no time to finish the spell, moves away from the wolf in fear. Red crashes her shoulder into the wolf and stops its attack on the sorceress. The wolf collapses to the ground nearby as the swordsman shouts, "Good job," and swings his sword. Captain Riggs plunges the sword into the immobilized demon wolf, killing it, and Red, clutching his shoulder, turns toward the other warriors' joyful shouts as they cheer for him and Captain Riggs. Captain Riggs asks the inspired men to handle the remaining demonic wolves, and they agree. Red approached the wounded warrior, raised his hand, and began to heal him, warning that even if he recovered, his lost blood and strength would not return, so he must not overexert himself. Then a man approaches Faye and politely asks to examine her badly injured leg. The protagonist touches the wound, and the girl feels intense pain, so he casts a restoration spell to relieve it, and she is surprised as the pain slowly fades. Reddit then turns to the captain and the others and asks whether they are adventurers, and they confirm they are escorting merchants from the royal capital, while their employer, Mr. Eric, steps out of the carriage, surprised by the Riggs. Rita finished healing Faith's leg and withdrew her hands, and the girl began moving it, surprised it was already healed. Captain Riggs lifts his wounded hand and asks if he can help them too. Retta casts a restoration spell and says they have come to get rid of the wolves. Mr. Eric looks out of the carriage, thanks the protagonist, and starts talking about payment for the treatment. Redo smiles and waves it off, saying everything is fine and there is no need to pay because he treated them for free, and Riggs swings his sword and thanks them as well. The captain immediately gives orders, telling Fafa to take on the wolves to the left of the carriage and the city warriors to deal with the wolf on the right, and with a battle cry, they move forward toward the pair of wolves. Shouting a battle cry, they surround each wolf in turn and attack with swords, bows, and halberds. Resting beside Redis, the warrior says that if they keep this up, he is sure they can destroy the whole pack, as long as the hero uses restoration on the wounded warriors. Worried, he faces the forest and tells everyone to wait while the others turn toward a large black shadow between the trees, saying something is approaching. A huge scarred demonic wolf appears before the town's warriors and slowly walks toward them. Amazed and shocked, the boys stare at him, ask what it is, and surprised by his huge size, assume he is the leader of the pack. A flick of his tail sends a warrior flying, breaks his spear, and knocks others aside. Charging toward the cart, the pack leader looks wild at the sight of the other demon wolves lying dead on the ground. The warrior tells Red to look at him, and Red agrees that this demonic wolf is clearly the pack leader. The leader of the pack of demonic wolves throws back his head and howls, frightening the nearby warriors, while Captain Riggs and FIFA draw their weapons. The girl shouts that he's coming toward them while the warriors stand ready, waiting to see what he'll do. One warrior steps in front of Rada and says that although he's not very reliable, he'll protect the main character. Rita opens a spellbook and says there is nothing left to be done, and he must act as well. Focusing, he calls on the spirit of fire and orders it to burn the enemy to ashes, while the warrior watches over his shoulder in shock, and Retta points her hand forward and shouts a spell that sends firebolts at the leader of the wolf pack. Seeing the result, the protagonist says he stopped the wolf and immediately casts the fire spear's spell, piercing and burning enemies to ashes. Fiery spears pierce the wolf all the way through, lifting it off the ground. The pack's dead leader collapses to the ground as the spears disappear in front of the armed warriors. Surprised, FIFA asks what it was, and stunned Captain Riggs asks whether it really was the original fire magic, since it is so powerful. The warrior who stood up to protect Red lowers his sword and tells him his magic is incredible, saying it's the first time he's seen anything like it, and Red says it's nothing special and that even as an F rank he's still an adventurer magician. Captain Riggs orders everyone not to relax, warning that although the leader is dead, the demon wolves remain. Fiva asks about the rest of the pack. Rada says she will join them to fight the rest of the pack and asks them to watch the carriage. In Morelia, Amina sits at a hotel table, dressed as a cleaning lady with a mop, worrying that Radas still has not returned. Sitting at the table drinking tea, the grandmother tells the girl not to worry because her father will soon return safe and sound, and the innkeeper calls to the grandmother, who turns out to be the girl's mother, and to Mina, saying the younger ones from Rada have returned. Excited, Mina steps out of the hotel, sees the mayor sitting nearby, the children joyful about their victory, and the merchants' carts, but she only looks at Red Up. Seeing Rada safe and well, the girl smiles contentedly and feels relieved. Rada also notices the girl among the townspeople. Nina ran toward Red, who opened his arms, and she jumped into them, happy about his return. As evening fell, the people lit a large fire and held a feast to celebrate their victory over the pack of wolves. Retta, holding a mug, says it's very nice to enjoy the taste of ale after work and notes that Mina seems to be having fun, dancing with the innkeeper and smiling joyfully. The town mayor walks up to Rada and asks how he likes the holiday and whether he is enjoying himself. Rada answers that the banquet is wonderful. An old man sits beside him and says he wants to talk to Retta about tomorrow's trip to Amort, and Mr. Eric, the employer from the rescued cart, walks over, greets Mayor Morelia in red, and the mayor says the merchant has arrived just in time. Admitting he didn't introduce himself properly, the man says he is Eric Rah of the Rah Company. Reddish shakes Eric's hand, introduces himself as Reddickson, and says he is pleased to meet him. Mr. Eric thanks Reddickson for his help and for today's attack. He explains that thanks to him, all their companions are safe and sound, and even the potions were unharmed, so they can now calmly continue their journey to Avert, and Rita says this is very good. Watching Mina dance, the merchant asks if the protagonist will take his daughter with him to Amort. He also offers them a ride in his carriage to the city. Rada says that would be wonderful, and Mina calls to him. Watching the girl holding her grandmother's hand, Mina invites him to dance with them, while the rest of the villagers dance behind them. Pushing Red from behind and pulling Mina by the hand, the innkeeper asks them to wait because he does not know how to dance, and Mina tells him to do his best and hurry. Mayor Morelia and Mr. Eric wave goodbye to the boy until tomorrow. Rada and Mina take hands and start dancing to the music, surrounded by other townspeople. Men play drums, lute, and horn, creating music that encourages everyone to dance. Counting each step aloud, 1, 2, 3, the main character made Mina laugh, and realizing he looked like a dancing bear, kept going while watching the happy girl in front of him. A tipsy young man remembers his ex-girlfriend Linda and grows more gloomy. The innkeeper calls him a hero and asks what happened and why he looks so down, and Retta, embarrassed by that label, asks not to be called a hero. Seeing this, Mina laughed, and the hero looked at her, asked why she was laughing, and realized he had something to think about. The girl tells the boy his face is flushed. Still looking at her, he wonders if it's worth bringing Mina, since no one in Morelia knows her and his journey ends in Amiata. Rita knows this doesn't mean the girl will find her acquaintances in Amort, and that in Morelia she is making more friends. He looks at her, calls out to her, takes her hand and says they will go to Amort tomorrow. Mina smiles and says it's good and she's looking forward to it, The young man smiles, setting his doubts aside. Standing before her, he says tomorrow will be hard and suggests they go to bed after the song. She agrees. The next morning, ready to leave, the protagonist shook Mr. Erich's hand and thanked him, and Mr. Erich returned the gesture, saying we must help each other in difficult times. Carrying a basket, the innkeeper and her mother approached Mina and said the cookies were made together and would be perfect for snacking on the road, and Mina thanked them. The townspeople and the mayor said goodbye to Rada, telling him to be sure to come back and that he was always welcome. Seated in the carriage, Mr. Erich called to the hero and told him to get in quickly, since there was no need to delay the farewell, and all the villagers saw them off. As they set off on their journey, everyone called after them to come again because the residents were always glad to see them, and the residents' children shouted that they would be waiting while Retta and Mina waved goodbye. Once they left the city, Captain Riggs sat with them in the carriage, sighed and said it turned out to be too early for their group to fight the demonic wolves, and Fifa beside them nodded in agreement. Hanging his head, he admitted that even though Rita used such powerful healing magic, he was still an F rank, and Fife said the attack magic was impressive too. Riggs hesitates because he and Fafa are both F ranks and doubts they will ever reach E rank. Redia tells him they are still young and is confident they will succeed, saying that with enough effort C and B ranks will be within reach. The swordsman smiles and says it would be good if that's true. At that moment, the archer calls out that the situation is getting worse and he will need the leader's help. Captain Riggs confidently tells Phaetho it's time for them to get to work, and the mage girl agrees. They step out of the cart. Mr. Eric says that if they keep traveling like this, they will reach Amort before evening. Red is surprised and asks whether it can really be that fast, since he heard the journey takes 2 days. The man tells him that if you take the old road you used to have to detour, but now things are steadily developing, with new bridges and roads being built, so it's much easier to get around. Surprised, Retta points out that Amort's development is amazing. Mina listens with curiosity and looks at Red A. They continue toward the mountain in good company. Mina eats tasty cookies from a basket the innkeeper gave her. After a while, Reddit turns to the cab driver, notices a large wall, and says she sees a city. Mr. Eric asks if this is a Mert. Many people are working on the outer wall, and because the city is still developing, there are few buildings, and much of the land is just dirt and a road. Mr. Eric says the city is very nice and lively, and Rita says thoughtfully that in that case, there is plenty of work here even for someone who is not an adventurer. The man says they are almost there, and that if either he or Mina has any problems, they can safely contact the Raha company, and he promises to repay the service debt, while Rida asks about the service and is surprised. Mr. Eric taps the boxes of goods and says he means the demonic wolves have been destroyed, so they can now continue to trade without worry. Send a thank you note for letting him ride in Mr. Eric's carriage, and you can also contact her if any difficulties arise. Noticing Mina had gone quiet, he saw she had fallen asleep leaning against the young man and smiled, saying their conversation seemed too boring for her. Stepping out of the wagon, Rida thanks them for their help, and the man says they are heading to the merchant gate. Captain Riggs and FIFA say goodbye to the heroes and suggest that if they meet again, they should go on a mission together. Rita and Mina exchanged a look. Then the man invited them into the Mert, and they held hands as they went through the gate. A wide street lies in front of Red and Mina, lined with 2- and 3-story houses where many people walk and carts pass, and the hero studies the map while holding the girl's hand. Soon the protagonist arrives at the Amur branch of the Adventurers Guild, where Millet, a guild employee, greets the heroes and offers to help. Red smiles at the girl in front of him and says he wants to move here and register with the guild. The guild employee asks again whether they want to move and then politely invites them to the far table. Sitting at a distant table, Red and Mina are given a form to fill out that the guild will use to contact them, and the hero takes a pen and writes Red Dixon's name in the field, noting that Mina also needs to write hers. The boy fills in the field for the girl sitting next to him, who reads Mina Dixon while watching his actions. Rado apologizes for not wanting to interfere and hopes the girl does not mind as she looks at her. Mina lowers her head, shakes her head to mean no, then smiles and says everything is fine and that she is grateful. In the next field indicate the purpose of the move. The hero hopes this will mean relatives will be here, so write the reason and ask the guild about it later. Reaching into the pouch on his belt, he pulls out a letter and says it is a recommendation from the Royal Headquarters Guild. The worker accepts the letter and asks to see it. Deeply surprised, Millet reveals it is not a letter of recommendation, leaving Red greatly shocked. Instead, the employee says it's not a standard letter, but a recommendation from Sarah. Mina, worried, asks if something is wrong, and the employee says it's better than a regular letter of recommendation. He then asks if the letter says Mr. Dixon can use healing magic, because he thinks Dixon earns money at the Healers Guild, and reading it confirms this, but says he can only use restoration. Jumping up, the worker says the ability to use healing magic, even if only restoration, is priceless and asks that the request be processed as soon as possible. Retta asks about the request. The hero refuses and asks them to wait politely because he doesn't even know where he and Mina will stay today, but Millet said the guild has an inn they use where the heroes can stay. The employee adds that the guild will pay for the inn and give them free access to the guild's grim wars. Reddit is grateful to them for this. Calm now, Millet looks into the hero's eyes and asks whether he will ultimately accept their application. Reddit puts a hand behind her head and says it's just healing magic replacing the potion, and the worker says that's no problem, bows and thanks. Handing over a sealed letter, she says it's for the inn, and Rada accepts it gratefully. Later that evening, the main characters arrived at the hotel, where they were met by Riggs Dahlan, owner of the Bearded Dwarf, and a girl standing beside him who introduced herself as Milan. Red shakes Riggs' hand and introduces himself and Mina, saying the girl is shy and that he hopes Milan will befriend her. The girls smiled and shook hands, then Milling asked if she lived in the city and if Mina would be her friend, and Mina shyly agreed. The innkeeper says his daughter has taken a liking to Red's daughter and they're having fun, and Red awkwardly reveals Mina is not his daughter, surprising Riggs. Riggs Dahlan says anything can happen to an adventurer, and he won't go into details, because if she is under Rita's protection, then so be it. He then points out the room is shared, and suggests taking a vacant one instead. Red says he has no more questions, and thanks them for their hospitality. The Bearded Dwarf's owner is happy to help and reminds them that, since they'll be living under the same roof, they should treat each other like family. Riggs asked his daughter to show the guests their room, and not to forget the bathroom and toilet. Smiling, Maylene said she understood everything, and her father told her they would all eat together later and asked her to join. Pulling Mina by the hand, the innkeeper's daughter invites her to go while Red and Riggs stay behind talking among themselves. Later, Milan runs to the table with a tray of food on her head, smiling as she apologizes for the wait and says the pilaf, salad, and soup, with plenty of meat, are ready. She sets the plates on the table and sits beside Mina, while Red sits opposite, waiting for the others. When everything is brought, they wish each other bon appetit and begin to eat, smiling. Mina starts with the hot soup, and after tasting a spoonful, she says with a happy face that the food is delicious. Mealing, supporting the happy Mina, says her dad's food is always very delicious. She really likes it and says it is magical. Retta, tasting the pilaf, says it is perfectly fried, crispy, aromatic, and delicious, but he thinks it is a bit salty from the grill. Other guests at the inn also praise Mr. Riggs, saying they always think of the gnomes as blacksmiths. Reddy says that both food and a sword can do anything. Malin tells the guests that her father forged swords, but when she was born, he became a cook. Rita says Malin has a cool dad, and with a bright smile, she adds that it's definitely true. The heroes return to their room. The man says the owner's daughter is very cheerful. Mina agrees and says they have become a bit friendly. The young man says that's good because they will be here for some time. A gentle knock sounds at the door, and they turn to ask who is there. Suddenly, Mailing comes in smiling and invites Mina to go to the bathroom. Mina and Milan enter a special room together, where Mina helps her new friend wash her hair. After pinning up her hair, she asks if the innkeeper's wife is here. Mailing says she still has a lot of fun doing things with her father every day. Looking at the heroine, he says things can be strange, and they sometimes have trouble with guests. She suddenly jumps out and says her father does this, striking a heroic pose with a smile. After that, folding her arms across her chest, she tells him her friend's father is just as good. Mina smiles and says Retta is indeed a very good and kind person. Holding hands and kneeling, one girl happily shouts that she hopes their fathers get along so well they can bathe and wash clothes together. Now Rita feels awkward hearing the girls and quietly says Melon is going a bit overboard. The next day, near the city, people are cutting down a forest while Red takes a wounded person's hand and uses his restoration magic. The Amore adventurer text is shocked by the healing and says he is amazed that Red healed 3 people with serious wounds. He says he wondered what kind of guy Red was, and Red turned out to be a good one because he will be doing an assignment with a child, and the guy apologizes, saying he only arrived in Amorta yesterday and therefore cannot leave her alone. Text lays his hand on the girl's hair and, smiling, says she has a good father and calls her a young lady. Mina thanks him and calls the adventurer uncle. The man looks sad and tells the young woman to take it easy, asking her to at least call him Big Brother because he's only 40, while the nearby warriors insist he's old enough to be called uncle and say he looks more like a grandfather. Then Tex puts an arm around the main character and asks Mina whether he is also her uncle. Mina, not expecting the question, pauses to think. She smiled and said it was not true that Rida was an uncle. Rida laughed and thanked the girl. After a while, the men look at the protagonist, who, not understanding, asks what they want. The adventurer says he will leave the rest of the work to him, pats Red on the back, and he, understanding, turns to Tex. Excited, he asks him to wait and to say exactly what he wants him to do. Smiling, the man tells him to just try doing something with magic. Rita looked at the adventurers and clarified that they wanted him to cut down trees in the forest, asking how they imagined it, and after thinking, he said it was worth a try, while Tech added that if he had any ideas, he should feel free to try them. The protagonist agreed, warned them to stay away, and turned to the spirit of the wind. Focusing, he ordered the invisible blades to dance and scatter in all directions below, then shouted to release the spell-cutting blades of wind. Red cast a spell and the trees crashed down as they were cut at the base. Everyone was stunned. Red said it was more powerful than he expected. Mina, standing behind with the others, said he was cool. Tix, excited and shocked, shouted that he had of course asked for help, but had not expected it to go this far. Others spoke up, surprised these were Windblade entry-level magic, saying red Windblades were clearly a higher level, and that at this rate, they'd lose their jobs and would rather become lumberjacks. Red awkwardly raised his hand behind his head and said he'd been on a roll lately. Text pointed out that magic depends on how much power there is and asked how much of that power the hero had. Tex nodded and said they'd talked enough and had work to do, wondered what to do with all the cut wood, suggested putting it in a cart, and added that with about 30 of them, the time for cutting them down was reduced. Rita reached out with his hand and cast the binding chain spell on all the cut wood on the ground, tying them together. Then he told the others he actually had a special box for things. Using storage magic, the protagonist pulled every bundle of wood into his belt bag, stripping the forest bare and leaving only stumps. Everyone nearby was shocked again, and the adventurer's description called the young man a jack of all trades. Standing with everyone, Mina watched Red happily chatting with others and thought what a good person he was. Smiling, she remembered that when they first met she had found him intimidating and stayed cautious, but she soon realized he was not, and despite only giving her name, he treated her kindly. Rita had always cared for her and been kind. He was unlike any healer she'd ever known. The men in front of her shouted they were leaving earlier than planned, that they would load their things, harness the horses, and go home. Minamit, the healer, only talked about money, while Reddit cared about those he healed. The man says he will help the others and asks Minam to wait. Smiling, Mina waved at Red and told him to come back soon, thinking how lucky she was to have met a man like him. The girl knows he asked Mrs. Millet at the guild and Mr. Riggs at the inn about her family. Staring at the moon, she worried about her family and what would happen if Frida learned the truth about her. Imagining his gloomy face, she worries he will stop smiling at her, decide she is terrible and leave, while inside she screams that she does not want this. Ridu smiles and waves to her, calls her home, and harnesses the horses to the carts after everyone else has already gathered. Smiling, she agrees and says she is already on her way, realizing she wants to stay with him. Soon after, they reach the bustling city of Amorta, where a hooded figure in a cloak watched them from above. A girl's face, streaked with dirt and scratches, peeks from under her hood as she holds it and watches the main characters from the roof. Sometime into the new mission, 2 dead monsters lie on the ground, a cart lies broken, and wounded people are nearby while Rida uses restoration magic. The healed warrior stands, lays a hand on the hero's shoulder, and thanks Red Dixon for saving him. He had heard about her restoration spell from his sister, but seeing it himself convinced him she was amazing because he thought he would die. Surprised, Rida wonders which sister he means and raises her hand to her face. The man puts his hands to his eyes and mimes glasses with his fingers, telling the hero to look, and Rita immediately realizes he means Millet's employee from the Amort branch of the guild and notes that he really does look like his sister. Staring at the demon's dead body, the young man says he never expected such a large monster here, only an hour's drive from the city, and the warrior says he usually only noticed small animals. Mina walks up to the talking boys and reminds them that seeing demonic wolves in Morelia has drawn attention to her. Excitement about what's happening makes her nervous, so the warrior considers her words, and then she suggests the animals may be fighting over territory. They look at the people around them. Rida asks what they will do about it, and the warrior replies they need to fix the cart, so they will stay here for the night and leave for Amort in the morning. Rada says he and Mina will return before dark. The warrior tells them to be careful, and they shake hands. After that, the protagonist and the girl leave, saying goodbye to the whole group, who decide to stay the night. Rida and Mina walked into town hand in hand, enjoying the breeze, the rustling leaves and the birdsong, and after his errand, Rada felt tired and yawned, so Mina asked if he was okay and wanted to sleep. The girl then asks him if he had been studying magic from the guild's grim wars while she slept yesterday, and Rita replied that he had fallen asleep before it got too late, so everything was fine and he was grateful she had worried about him. Sudden loud noises came from the forest, startling the birds, so the heroes listened and Mina asked what the sounds were. Noticing a small path, she pointed it out to Rada, and he decided to check, saying they should see how things were and return immediately if it proved dangerous, and Mina said she understood. Along the path, the heroes came across several dead monsters and a cart among the trees. Running up to them, he asked if they were okay and immediately said he was an adventurer from Amorta, but when he took a closer look, he realized they were elves and was surprised to find them so close to where people lived. Quickly, the elf drew his bow and arrow and shouted at the man to stop and stay back. Rita raised his hands to show he meant no harm and told him to wait, insisting he would not hurt anyone because he expected the elves disliked people, but would be far more careful than he could imagine. Noticing a wounded elf child nearby, he asks if the child is okay, but the elf with the bow tells Rada firmly that this is their problem and they will handle it themselves, the elf child lying on the elf's lap. Mina shouted that this child was suffering, and Rada said he could use restoration magic. The man says firmly that they do not trust people. Rada, keeping her hands at her sides, asks them to trust that he will cure her if they let him examine the child. The elf beside her, with tears in her eyes, says she is glad they want to help them, but the elf boy was poisoned by the fangs of a ruby tiger, and normal restoration magic will not help him. Riddish points out that if it's poison, he can cast a detox spell, giving the elf hope. She rushes to her husband, stops him from shooting, and asks the protagonist to heal her son. The archer calls her Edith and objects. Edith looks at the man in tears, calls him Klaus, and says that if they do nothing the child named Kate may die, so they must trust. Red runs past the quarreling elves to the child, and Klaus, seeing this, draws his bow again. Edith, still standing beside him, says this man should help them, but Klaus keeps aiming while Mina shields Red with her body. Mina, shielding Red with her body, says if he does something wrong, let the elf shoot her so they will be even. The elf was very surprised. After examining the elf, Rada thanked the girl, but wondered why she had been so reckless, then began by casting a detox spell on the elf boy lying on the ground. Red was glad he had learned the detoxification spell from the Grim Wars and resolved to keep prioritizing healing spells in his magic training, using restoration magic. The boy poisoned by the ruby tiger's venom lay beside Rada. Edith, tears in her eyes, tells Klaus to look at Keith's complexion, which was getting better. Klaus called to the boy while lowering his bow, and Mina turned with relief, saying everything seemed to have worked out. Cloud knelt, bowed his head, apologized to Red, and thanked her sincerely for healing his son. He added that they couldn't afford his treatment. Red Ash shook his head, waved his hands, and told the elf not to worry, since he was just an adventurer who could use recovery magic. The hero pulls a piece of paper from his bag and says if they want to thank him, they can simply report the completed task to the Amorta Adventurers Guild as payment for his help. Klaus read it and was surprised to see it cost 5 silver coins, and Edith said it was even cheaper than the potion she had bought, while Mina added that potion prices have risen recently because there are more monsters now. Rada asked why they had to go to people for the potion when the elves had a miracle cure he had heard worked much better than a regular potion. The elves shook their heads and said the miracle cure was gone. Red asked why it had happened. Klaus said it was all because of the dragon. The protagonist was very surprised by the news. Klaus told them a black dragon had appeared near their settlement recently and had started attacking often, and Edith said their warriors fought it and drove it off, but the damage was too great. They've used all their miracle medicine, and many warriors are still suffering from their wounds. If he attacks again, they will have to leave the village. Nina turned to him with a worried look, and Red patted her head with a calming smile. Red then turned to Klaus and asked if he could go with them to the village, because he thought his restoration magic would be useful there. Edith looked at the elf, and Klaus said he could be a great help to them. Red introduced himself. The elf said he would try to convince everyone in the village and urgently asked for help healing their warriors. When Heath came to, he felt the carriage rocking and no pain in his body, so he assumed he was dead and opened his eyes. Seated beside him, Mina noticed and asked if he was okay, which greatly surprised the elf boy. Still worried about him, she asked if he was in any more pain and if everything was okay, and when Keith confirmed it, she smiled brightly, relaxed, folded her hands in front of her, and said she was happy for him. Keith tried to figure out how it had happened, amazed that his last memory was being in the human city with his mom and dad, who were covering their ears as they bought a potion. While they were returning, a ruby tiger attacked and bit him, knocking him to the ground with its heavy weight. Now an angel stands before him offering a towel, and a man sits beside her, though that does not matter. His parents also noticed the boy woke up. Standing up, he pressed a towel to his forehead and began to speak. Mina asked what he wanted to say, and the blushing elf told her his name was Keith and thanked her for her concern. Mina introduced herself and said she was glad to meet him. Kate asked excitedly where the girl was from. The girl answered awkwardly that she was from Amorta. The elf said he had also been there recently. Then he said his mother cooks for the army, and his father uses a sword more than a bow, which surprised everyone around him. Redon notices the tree has split and opened the way for the carriage, and is surprised by this phenomenon. Mina notices that as the carriage passes, the trees slide back into their old positions and the road disappears, while Kate keeps watching the girl. The carriage stopped in the middle of the forest, and Mina, surprised, looked around and asked why they had stopped. Keith, happy and healthy, said this place was only for elves and pointed to the side. A large magic circle appeared directly beneath the carriage, and the elf said it was an ancient portal. They vanished and found themselves in a place under a night sky, surrounded by burnt and broken trees. The heroes were surprised to find ruined houses in the trees and realized it was the elves' settlement. Mina put her hand to her chest, looked around, and said sadly that it was terrible. A huge tree rose before them, its roots forming an arch that led to the gate. Klaus asked Retta if he could begin healing the warriors at once, and Retta agreed, because that was why Klaus had come. One elf was surprised to see Klaus return unharmed, and the elf beside him called out that a human stood nearby. The elves rushed over with bows ready and asked Klaus what they were doing. The heroes climbed down from the cart and walked toward the tree. The elves drew their bows and aimed at the humans, demanding to know who had given Klaus permission to bring humans into their settlement. Klaus shouts to get everyone's attention, then explains that Red can use healing magic and that Red saved their son's life when he was attacked by a monster on the way. The archers asked again if they'd heard correctly about healing magic and added that all human healers were greedy swindlers, and Mina said Rita was not like that, while Keith confirmed Mina's father was not like that. An old elf stepped out of the tree and asked why it was so loud. The archer turned and recognized him as the elder. Edith said their family vouched for Red and asked that he be taken to the warriors to be healed. Red bowed politely and introduced himself to the elder. He said he was just an adventurer who could use recovery magic, that its effects would be better than potions, so he'd like to begin healing immediately if permitted. The elder stepped forward red-faced and said thoughtfully that at such a time they had been visited by a man, a healer at that, and the two had looked into each other's eyes. The elder sighed, said it might be time for a change and accepted the offer, then promised to guide Red Dixon and asked him to save their warriors, which surprised the archers. Rida and Mina enter the tree and see many wounded elves lying on its huge leaves. The elder says they are lucky because thanks to Hildegard no one died. Mina asked the elder who Hildegard was, and the elder replied that Hildegard was the village's greatest warrior, unmatched in magical power. They defeated the dragon only because of her leadership. Retta pictured the scene and the happy elves. To save everyone, she took the dragon's fiery breath upon herself, and out of warrior pride, refused medicines and potions that could only bring temporary relief so other warriors could have them. Redden praised Hildegard, the settlement's best warrior, as remarkable. The elder said she had severe injuries all over her body, and while he could not fully heal her, easing her pain would make him very happy. Wrights promised to do his best. The elder pointed to the room and said she was behind the curtain. Wrights then looked in with the others and asked Hildegard if they could enter. Two warriors stood beside her, having just finished bandaging her, and were very surprised by her arrival. Redo found a girl in serious condition, lying on a huge tree leaf, and was surprised to learn she was the settlement's best warrior. Heel turned to the guard, opened her eye and looked at the elder. The elder immediately asked her not to get up. Angry, she struggled to sit up and asked the elder why the man had come to her. The elder reassured them that everything was fine and that he had invited them himself because the young man could use restoration magic. The young man introduced himself as Rita Dixon and stepped toward Hildegard. She pulled away in pain and asked him not to touch her. The protagonist put on gloves, said he would heal her, then touched the elf's wounds. After the restoration spell, the girl screamed that she couldn't move, and the man said he would listen to all the complaints later. Those around her watched with concern as she screamed for them to let go and leave her alone. Redia told her to move because the wounds would reopen, and she kept pleading not to be touched, while the man said that without touching he could not heal her. The girl tried to kick him in the stomach, and Reed asked how long she could resist. After the kick sent him to the floor, Red rubbed the back of his head and Hildegard stood up from a large leaf on the tree. When the bandages fell away, those around her saw that Madame Hildegard's wounds were gone and no trace of the burns remained. She fixed her gaze on the man and checked that she had his name right, then leaned over him and said her flesh had melted so much her bones showed, and he had worked out who he was so easily. Rita told him to stop because it was no longer important. At first, he had wanted Hildegard to cover herself. The girls blushed deeply when they realized. The boy and the elder turned away, and she asked all the men to leave the room quickly. They rubbed their heads awkwardly and said it looked like they had been kicked out. The elder thanked her sincerely for the healing. Red said it was nothing special, and he was glad she was okay. Turning around, he said he still had plenty of magical power, so he would go treat the other wounded. The elder was delighted and said it would be great. The boy cast a healing spell on the warrior, while Mina stood nearby to help. Mina and Kate were happy to help the family of elves they had met in the forest, and did so enthusiastically. Soon, every place where the wounded had been was empty. The elder could not believe it because there had been 50 of them. Retta said he was damn tired. He said he'd been doing well lately, and his magical power seemed to be growing, as if the lid of a vessel had opened, and the power was beginning to overflow him. Klaus approached the heroes and told the elder that all the potions were now in the warehouse. The elder thanked the archer for his work. Klaus told Retta that because of him they still had every potion they'd bought. Retta was happy to hear that. The elder said it was time for the boy to rest, and to ask Klaus if everything was ready, and Klaus answered that it was. Edith said she hoped they would stay the night because they were lucky their house was still intact. Grateful, the hero thanked the elves and said he would stay the night with them. Mina also thanked him for barricading Keith. They then spent the night safely with the family. The next day they went back to the tree, entered the arch at its roots, apologized for disturbing her, and when they pulled back the curtain they saw Hildegard. Seeing the heroes arrive, she asked their names again and waited. Mina said she was very glad the elf's skin had healed. Hildegard said she only wanted to say thank you. Embarrassed, the elf apologized for not stopping the kicking yesterday and explained that elves do not treat people well, and Rada asked permission to find out why while Hildegard agreed to explain. She opened by saying there was less hostility now, but Bandit had been kidnapping elves for a long time, and that was the worst thing she could say. Hildegard says elves live long lives, so cruel people used them as servants, locking them in the cellars of wealthy homes, and no one can count how many times people tried to rescue them. Some elves didn't make it out alive, so they hate humans and keep their distance. Rada, understandably, said he was sorry. Hildegard looked away and said that some people leave their villages and settle with others. She and the other healed warriors are grateful to Red, and she thanks him from the bottom of her heart. Ritter raised his hands and said he was just doing what needed to be done, so there was no need to thank him. The girl puffed out her cheeks and said it was wrong to ignore someone's gratitude, glaring at him. Awkwardly, Rida said he understood and would accept her thanks. Hildegard sighed and said that, in that case, good. She turned to Mina and said she'd heard Mina had worked a lot with Keith. She took Mina's hands, pulled her close, said she wanted to give her a big hug to show her gratitude, and then they hugged. Claiming she did not like people, she let the two of them call her Hilda while stroking Mina's head. Mina looked surprised and said the elf's shortened name. Guard Hilda said that sounded nice, and added that Mina could call herself sister from now on. Mina smiled and thanked Sister Hilda. Smiling, Rida looked at the girls as they stood close together and hugged happily. Noticing him, Hildegard said she wanted to know one thing, and asked the hero how old he thought she was compared to Mina, and he was surprised by the question. She said the hero doesn't treat her like a child, and hasn't for a long time, sighing sadly. She was upset by the discrepancy because she grew very slowly, yet was already 316 years old, and Mina was shocked by this information. Startled, she said she felt quite remarkable for having lived so long, and the elf nodded contentedly and asked if it was true she deserved respect. He says 300 years isn't enough for elves because the same elder is 1,000 years old. People say the elder in the neighboring village, a month's walk away, is 2,000 years old. Shocked, Retta started counting 1,000, 2,000. Mina was surprised. Hildegard's ears twitched, drawing my attention. The girl asked what was wrong. The elf said it sounded like someone was running nearby. Rida asked again and glanced at the entrance curtain. Hildegard hoped the visitor did not have bad news. A moment later, Klaus comes in and apologizes for interrupting the conversation, then announces the Black Dragon is here, and everyone shouts, "Black Dragon." Hildegard packed quickly and ordered Klaus to prepare to intercept. Klaus acknowledged the command and left. Lil then approached Retta and thanked him and Mina for the wonderful time, but said she had to go fight. Rida asked Hilda to wait, but Hilda said she could not because, although she was healed, the pain still remained, and she asked if Rida still wanted to go. Tapping his shoulder, she reminds him she is the village's best warrior, and that if she does not fight, no one else will. Facing Mina, the protagonist looked into her eyes and sighed deeply as he thought about his hard choice, then said he was going to, which shocked her and made her grab his hand to stop him. He told the girl that on the battlefield he could support them with magic and healing. Hildegard did not object and said it was fine, so they should go together. They pulled back the curtain and went into the room. Retta winked at Mina and said he'd make sure everyone came back safe and sound, so she could stay and cheer for them. Mina said she'd definitely be there. They stepped into the center of the elven village, where the other warriors had gathered. Hildegard then shouted to draw everyone's attention. On the hill she shouted that the black dragon had recently burned their village and was their enemy, and knowing they were afraid she admitted she was too, but warned that if they ran no one else would protect their village or friends. Their speech fired up the warriors. Leaders raised their hands and said the elves' pride is their arrows, urging them to shoot him. The warriors lifted their bows and declared they would not lose this time and that victory would be theirs. Seeing the black dragon appear and approach, Hildegard turned and ordered the archers to take their places. From high above the village, the black dragon approached and looked down, seeing the elves' armed army clearly, and Retta Dixon, the main character, stared up in awe at the dragon's huge body. Soon the black dragon hovered over the village, and archers in hollows carved into the tree trunks shouted that the battle was starting and began firing at it. A hail of arrows left the dragon badly wounded and tore holes in its wings. Screaming, he spread his wings and tried to pull the arrows from his body. Hildegard shouted from below for everyone to keep shooting at him, and she fired too. High above the elf village, a black dragon opened its mouth, bared its fangs, and looked down. Hildegard shouted that the dragon was breathing, warning all the warriors in the village. She cast a spell that raised a barrier around her and the archers, forming a large magic circle under her feet. Wounded by arrows, the dragon breathed fire at the barrier, flames drifting around him from every side. The protagonist wiped sweat from their face, wondering why it was still so hot even though they'd put up a barrier. The dragon stopped spewing fire at them and saw the barrier still intact and the elves unharmed. Circling the village, he regained strength after his powerful attack. Seeing the chance, Hildegard ordered everyone to fire at him. The black dragon regained strength, turned and prepared his breath, and the elves noticed and raised another barrier against it. Helping with the spell, Rita asked the best warrior how many more times they had to repeat it before it was finished. The elf looked at Rida and apologized for pulling him into all this even though Rida was human, and Rito replied calmly that it was fine since he had suggested it himself, while the elves beside them quickly refilled their quivers. Hildegard smiled as she looked into Red's eyes and said she was still incredibly glad he was here, her precious healer. She said that once they defeat the black dragon, they will collect the reward from every village and send it to him. Redden said it is nice to be an adventurer, and he will be eager for that time. Lilligart called out that the dragon's breath was nearly gone and ordered everyone to get ready. On command, the elves opened fire again as the dragon regained strength after using its breath. Retta thought about the black dragon, which had already been pierced by many arrows and showed some damage. Despite uncertainty about whether they could actually beat him, his face showed both excitement and worry. After that, he closed his eyes, clenched his fist, and decided he couldn't think about it because they would certainly defeat him. The black dragon blew out his hot breath. Ridu wiped the sweat from his face and said it was hot steam. Ridu used restoration magic on the elf girl. The young man looked around and called out, asking if anyone had been burned, because he thought hot air alone could cause burns, not just direct exposure to the breath. It was no surprise so many were wounded. The black dragon was resting after he used his breath, smoke still rising from his jaws. Hilda said everything was fine and that the dragon was exhausted. She ordered everyone to take up their bows and start the attack. A hail of arrows shot straight at the dragon. Dodging them, the dragon flew on, but one arrow hit his neck. Hilda smiled and said they seemed to have annoyed the dragon. He didn't even realize how bad his wings were because he was just an ordinary lizard. The boy asked about the wings. Turning to them, he said the wing membranes were completely torn. That explained what the elves wanted. It was very surprising that he could still fly. The boy watched the dragon inhale and its belly swell. Red asked what the dragon was doing. Klaus told the boy to pull his hands in. It is the dragon's hidden weapon. Hilda shouted that the fireball was coming and ordered the elves to raise the barrier. The dragon opened its jaws and its fangs began to crack. Then it fired a volley that launched a fireball. Mina sat inside sorting the grass when the whole house suddenly began to shake. Mina felt scared and asked what it was. The elf boy explained there was a lot of noise and vibration and reassured her he could protect her. The girl went up to Mina and stroked her head, saying everything was fine. Mr. Rita was with Mrs. Hildegard and Klaus. She smiled and asked why the children weren't praying for them. The children agreed and started to pray. Nina hoped Red would come back alive. The dragon's fireball struck the barrier. Hild ordered the elf to raise a second barrier and said they needed both barriers to push it back. Red rubbed his hands and said he had healed all the wounded, so he would help them with the barrier and support it with his magic. Cloud said everything was going well and they still had a chance. The other male elf said they could push him away. Red noticed something and told Hilda to watch the dragon, whose belly was also swollen. Hilda shouted that he was about to fire a second shot. The black dragon was ready to burn everyone, even if it cost him his life. The black dragon fires another fireball, and his fangs snap off completely. Hilda said no dragon was that crazy. The dragon fires one more fireball. Hilda shouted that he had to run away from here right now. The young man helped hold the barrier and said he would not run away under any circumstances. More magic must be poured into the barrier, or it will fail. The barrier collapses, and a fireball moves toward the elves. Red shouted that he couldn't die here, saying he couldn't leave Mina alone and had to go back. Suddenly, a door opened behind the young man. Rita summons the spirit of the wind. Suddenly behind him appears the image of a girl who looks a lot like Nina, but is grown up. Pressing her hands into the boy's back, she widened the dark space, hugged Red, and told him to begin. A black aura burst from the passage. The youth summoned the wind's spirit and ordered it to become his shield and drive the enemy back. A sudden gust of wind swept around the elves. Hilda was frightened and asked what it was. Rana felt the weight lift from his heart, as if a shutter had been removed. Magic fills his body and makes him capable of anything. The young man summons the spirit of the wind and wields an invisible blade of dance. Extending his hand, the youth warned the black dragon he'd shoot it down and commanded a huge wind blade that sliced the dragon and cut off its wing. The black dragon was stunned when he realized his wing had been cut off. The dragon began to fall straight toward the ground. The monster crashed to the ground, cracking the earth beneath it. Rising onto its paws, it gave a piercing scream. It glared at the elves and the young man who had cut its wing. Happily, Klaus said that his fangs were broken and he couldn't breathe fire. His wing was torn so he couldn't fly, and he really was just a lizard now. Hilda ordered everyone to attack the monster together, so the elves combined their magic and summoned vine-like plants that wrapped around the dragon's body, the magic of root chains. Red thought about it and pictured the elves using the great tree's roots like tentacles. At that moment, he would be noticed through his thoughts. Stunned, the girl could not understand what kind of person Red was. Seemingly unreliable, he still had the courage to fight the black dragon face to face, which made him simply incredible. The girl stared at Red, thinking about his amazing healing and how he had knocked the dragon's breath from its system and cut off its entire wing with one blow. He had a small smile and fought a stutter, and she, having never seen people like that, felt a slight blush rise to her cheeks. Seeing Red filled her with joy. She extended her hand and told the boy to get it over with. She asked him to pour his wind magic into her hands. Her heart was pounding in her chest. Standing behind her, he asked if he was doing the right thing. Hilda drew the arrow while the boy poured magic into the girl's hand on the arrow and into the hand on the bow. She told him to pour more of his magic into her. Redis assured Hilda everything was fine and told her to release the arrow. A powerful wind rushed around the arrow. He will shout at the dragon to get it to open. The other elves held him down and shouted that this dragon had destroyed their homes. The girl shouted that Hildegard Ederer and Rita Dixon would defeat him. She kept the loaded arrow on her bow. Commanding the whirlwind's arrows, she sent them straight at the target. At last, she released an arrow that flew with great speed to the dragon's head. The monster faced its death. At last, the arrow pierced the dragon's head. It froze, the vines released its body, and the dragon fell lifeless to the ground. Hild and Rida stood stunned, staring at the monster. Rida asked if they had really defeated it. Hild turned to the boy and agreed they had. Hilda raised her hand and told the warriors to send a victory cry through their ranks to echo through the forests and cities and show that the true warriors dwell here, and then a loud cry rose. Villagers cheered and marked the happy event. The elves joined in, grateful for their forest, their land, and their new friends. Everyone toasted Red Dixon and Mina Dixon. The heroes sat at a round table and celebrated it all. Mina ate delicious food and drank with the other elves. The elf girl sitting next to the heroes asked Red how the drinks tasted and whether he liked them. Red agreed, saying the fruit wine tasted better each time. Smiling, the girl said it meant Mr. Rita liked wine, then took the jug and refilled the young man's glass. He scratched his head awkwardly and laughed. Mina added with a smile that the juice and the food were all very tasty. The elf beside her handed her a plate of treats and invited her to try some too. Mina thanked him for his kindness. Venus said the holiday had come again. Reddest smiled and agreed, and the elf youth asked about the holiday, where it was, and what it was. 10 days ago, Nina said a festival was held in Morelia to celebrate the destruction of a pack of demonic wolves. The elf sitting beside Rada said, surprised that they had also fought the demonic wolves. Rada agreed, saying they had not done it alone, as with this time. Looking up at the sky, the young man says that, although the black dragon has been defeated, things will only get harder from now on. Holding out an open palm, the elf girl turns to Mr. Red and asks him to look. The young man asks whether these are truly the seeds of the fruit served with the meal. Closing her eyes, the oath girl called on the spirit of the earth, and a magical seal formed above her palms, as she asked the spirit to share its power with life. The seed suddenly sprouted and a small plant appeared in the girl's hands. Mina told Mrs. Adita it was very cool. The girl said elves can grow plants. Smiling sweetly, a tree began to sprout in her hands. Ms. Edita Winks adds that the large tree will reach full size in about 3 years, and by summer the other trees will be lush. A male elf steps forward and apologizes to Mr. Red for keeping him waiting. The boy, surprised, says he thought he would not see the elder, Hilda, and Klaus. He adds that they were discussing the reward. The elder said the village had little saved, so the reward would be 1/3 of the sale price of the black dragon's carcass. Retta sounds very surprised and asks whether it is really 1/3 and whether that is too much. The elder said they had helped them a lot, and some even said 1/3 would not be enough. Klaus insisted the heroes accept it because it was for the mirror's future. Red paused, bowed, and promised to take care of her. Their wind blades and air barrier greatly surprised him. Approaching the dragon, he uses the storage skill. The youth adds that the carcass will take up too much space in storage. The huge dragon carcass disappears. He says he will just keep the wing he cut off and thinks it will fill him. The elder says that because of the young man, they did not have to cut anything up and can sell the carcass in the human city in its original form. Klaus adds that they will use the money for restoration. They will also consider starting a collaboration with humans. Redder says it would be very cool. Hilda says this is not the only reward, and the elder and the clouds are surprised and ask the girl what she is doing. Hilda says the young man does not seem to have a wife. He does not understand what the girl means. Pointing at him and smiling, Hilda says that Hildegard Ederer will be his bride. All the elves who were celebrating were stunned. Rada froze, mouth and eyes wide, grabbed his head and asked what the girl meant. The elves began asking Hilda if she could be serious. Whispers spread as people wondered whether Hild had decided to follow her older sister's example, now that she was talking about marrying a human. The girl grew irritated, turned to the elves, and shouted about what he had said, telling them to come straight to her. At that moment, Mina went up to the altar and tugged his robe, asking the man if Sister Hilda really had a sister too. The man stroked Mina's head and nodded. He said he should tell Mina and the groom-to-be. Redia asked if he had heard correctly that he was already being called a groom. Others confirmed Hildegard had an older sister, and everyone was glad to hear it. Elves rarely have children, and sisters are even rarer, which makes them special. 50 years ago something happened. Hildegard was 260 years old then. Against the tribe's advice, her older sister ran off with her lover, a human. After that, Hildegard's hatred of people grew, and she could not understand how any man would dare take her sister from her. After that, the elven leaders declared that elves must never interact with humans again, so Hilda, defying the sister who had abandoned her, devoted all her time to becoming a warrior. The girl snorted and said love and romance are nonsense. She is a warrior. Klaus suddenly mimicked Hilda. Angered, she said he had asked for it, then activated the seal and drew a sword. The young man followed the girl, drew his sword, and laughed that the girl could not defeat her in close combat. Then the fight began. The other elves cheered and backed Hilda and Klaus. Red scratched his head and asked about the marriage, as if it were a joke. Mina noticed the young man's anxiety and awkwardly asked if he was all right. The next morning the sun shone brightly. A huge seal lay on the ground with a harnessed cart beside it. When Kaido suggested playing together next time, Mina agreed and said she was looking forward to it. Hilda told Retta they would miss him, but he would not be alone for long because the girl would be coming to him soon. Retta smiled awkwardly and said the girl had brought it up again. Opening her eyes, he smiled and said it was natural. She now understood what her sister had felt. It was natural to want to live with the man she loved. Rita asked whether the girl was serious about him being her lover, and Hilda, embarrassed, said she could not joke about that because she had truly fallen in love with the young man. Klaus stood behind him, mocking Hilda again and calling her a warrior. Redo tried hard to suppress his laughter. A moment later, Hilda punched Klaus in the face. Red felt genuine sympathy for him. The village chief patted Red on the shoulder and called him dear groom, saying if Red did not want the marriage he could force her out, and Red laughed awkwardly as he was kicked out. Redath considered sending Hilda away, but realized he could not. Then Klaus came up and asked whether they were ready to leave, and he agreed it was time for them to go. At last the harness leash moved straight to the center of the seal. The other elves wished their friends good luck. Reda and Mina waved goodbye. Moving through space, Red realized this adventure included both dragons and elves. Both the guild and Mrs. Millet will be very surprised. Later, the hero meets Mrs. Millet. A girl screamed and demanded to know how it had happened. They said nothing and vanished, and Red thought she broke into tears and began scolding them. The girl wiped her tears away and said she was very worried. Nina also disappeared for 2 days. Nina and Reda bowed apologetically and huddled next to them under a cloak. The girl said she thought Red and Mean were in trouble and were fed up with the way the guild treated them, so they went somewhere else. Awful thoughts kept circling in her head as the girl grabbed the boy's hand, sobbed, and thanked them for coming back to them. Klaus interrupted them, apologized to the girl, took off his hood, and said that Red was out of town because he was saving them. Noticing the stranger's pointed ears, the girl's vision blurred, and she was stunned to see an elf standing before her. After a while the girl began writing, saying Mr. Redo was a healer in the elven village who had helped destroy the black dragon and apologizing for causing such a mess. Redes gave an awkward smile and agreed. The girl said the elves wanted to sell the black dragon to fund the village's restoration. Klaus nodded and consented. Klaus called someone, spoke to Mr. Red, and reminded the young man that he could store it. Nervous, the girl gave a shaky smile and asked if the boy had brought the dragon, then shook her head and told herself she was talking nonsense and that he couldn't have brought a dragon. Red and the girl laughed nervously as they looked at each other. Klaus interrupted and said they had brought it and that he wants the guild to appreciate it. The girl looked very scared. She shouted at Red not to bother this dragon, tears in her eyes, as she said no one in the local guild could appreciate it. Klaus said it was a problem. Rita then suggested he go to the capital, though he did not really want to. The girl told them to wait and said she would call members of the capital guild to assess the black dragon. Red gave an innocent smile and asked the girl to do it then. Clouds asked her if she could estimate how long it would take. After thinking, the girl said 2 weeks would be enough, and Klaus stood up to say he was returning to the village. He then remembers something and says their village decided to take this chance to establish relations with the people, and he looks forward to working with them again. She says she understands and shakes Klaus's hand, and he says he will tell the elder, who will expect them in 2 weeks. The heroes leave the Adventurers Guild. Klaus asks whether he should buy some baked fruit for Katha and Adita. Weta laughs and tells Klaus he is a pretty good father, and Close tells the boy he is not bad either. The boys bow and Klaus thanks Red for his help and says goodbye. Red returns the farewell and says they will meet soon. Klaus pats Mina's head and says he'll bring Kat along next time so they can play together. Mina is happy and agrees. They say goodbye. Rita thinks about Klaus calling him father and looking at Mina. He decides they should have a proper talk. He starts to stroke the girl's head. Mina says it tickles and then asks the boy what is wrong with him. Red has said that when they return, they will have to apologize to Riggs and Melon, and he gives a small smile while agreeing with the young man. Later that night, everyone went to bed. Mina dreamed of a hooded girl who told her that Mina had only cared about her own happiness and would never forgive her for it. Mina turned and saw Red, utterly crushed and expressionless. A hooded girl with bloody tears stood behind him. She suddenly drew a blade and plunged it into Red's neck. Mina could only tell her to stop. Mina woke abruptly from the stream. Rising from bed, she saw Red beside her and said it had only been a dream. Tears came when she took the young man's hand, and she sat beside Red holding his hand all night. The next morning, Nosha came to the Adventurers Guilds to meet Millet. After her report, Red said there was no mention of anyone looking for Mina. She agreed, saying the royal capital headquarters had contacted the various branches. Bowing, she apologized to the young man for not being able to help. Rita waved his hands and said the girl did not need to bow because he was already grateful to her. After a while, Rida approaches Mina and apologizes for the wait. With no tasks today, they can just take a walk. Mina smiles and agrees. They stroll through the city toward a shopping street, passing a shop where ripe vegetables are displayed. They then went to a sweet shop where a cute girl was calling, and Nina was very surprised by the large number of cookies. Rita tastes the sweets and is surprised by how tasty they are. Mina tastes the cookies and is surprised by how crispy they are. Rita looked at the girl and thought things were going well. It seemed the walk had encouraged Mina a great deal. 3 nights ago she cried hard and was constantly depressed, apparently after a bad nightmare that night. Later, after leaving the candy store, Red and Mina reach a bridge that crosses a small river. Mima was delighted and asked Red to look into the water. Fish there had scales that shone beautifully. The young man agreed with the girl and looked into the water. He realized there was no way he could leave her alone, and it would probably be better to tell her everything. Turning to Mina, the young man says he needs to speak with the girl about something important. Mina looks surprised and asks him about it again, and the girl grows very tense as she watches him. Rita said he had never been married and didn't know how to raise children, but if the girl didn't mind, she could be his daughter and he her father, so he wanted to ask her if she would be part of his family. The young man stroked my head while the girl began to cry about family, then asked whether he was sure and whether she could really become part of his family. A voice suddenly said she couldn't do that. It was the girl from Mina's earlier dream. Redder shielded Mina with his body and asked who the girl was. She pulled back her hood, and Mina studied her closely. She began to cry, stepped in front of Rada, and spoke to her sister. The young man was very surprised because he had met Mina's sister. With an empty look, the girl agreed and waved, saying she and Mina had not seen each other for a long time. She said she was looking for Mina. Grinning, she replied she was glad the girl was safe. Mina didn't understand what her sister meant. The girl started twirling a blade on her finger as she spoke. Mina couldn't believe the girl had just said she wanted to join his family. She hurled the dagger directly at the young man and said she could not forgive what he had done. The boy deftly dodged the dagger. Red asked the girl what she planned. Mina's sister smirked and said he seemed clumsy, but at least he reacted. Mina called her sister in a panic, but her sister got angry and told her to wait. She said she would beat the old man first, and then it would be Mina's turn. The girl was very surprised, but Reed immediately covered her with his hand. He asked what she was saying. Mina's sister told him to be quiet, then threw another dagger at him. Red used magic to drive him back and asked whether the girl was her sister. She agreed, saying her name was Rana. Then she immediately jumped off the roof of the building. On landing, she said this was typical of the old man. She was mean as a sister. Retta found Rana's behavior very strange. Dealing with her would not be easy because she was very strong. Retta told Mina to hide behind that bridge. Mina agreed and ran away. Red-Eye turned to Rana and asked why she wanted to kill her little sister. Rana kept throwing daggers at the boy and told him not to use her name. Using magic, the young man deflected the girl's dagger again, but another dagger flew past and cut through the armor on his shoulder. The girl smirked and said the boy's barrier was working slower than it should. At that moment, Mina told her sister to stop attacking and asked why she was doing it. The girl said it was because Red was a bad person who wanted to use her and discard her. Moving in close, she attacked the young man, while Red dodged and repeated his question about taking advantage, asking the girl what she meant. Rana spun at the boy, but he raised a barrier. She smiled and asked whether his magic had grown stronger after meeting Mina. Red was taken aback. Rana jumped aside and said it was because he was using Mina's skill gift. The girl makes several magical seals and daggers start flying out. Red asked about the gift and what else it was. Red dodged it skillfully. Rana says the young man knows Mina's skill strengthens the nearest target. Red shook out his cape and said that now he understood why he had recently realized he could heal a dozen people and why he had also managed to cut off a dragon's wing. Rana couldn't make sense of what the young man was saying. At that moment, Mina distracted them and told her sister to stop because Retta was not a bad person. Rana created a seal and dropped a dagger at Mina's feet, and a girl shouted that she had warned her the girl would be next. Rana asked what she was doing because she was your sister and they were family. She said they were family because the young man had noticed earlier that she had been watching them for several days. Rana says she will take care of her personally, first freeing her from that filthy young man and then bringing her home. So the boy must die. Daggers kept coming at him, and Red tried to dodge but failed to avoid one. Mina got scared and called Retta. To calm her, the young man said he was fine. Rana interrupted and said that's why she and Mina should go home together. Rana believes they will both be forgiven if they return together. Mina started screaming and said she did not want to go back there. Mina shouted and asked her sister what was wrong. At that moment, Reddist began healing his shoulder and said she did not understand what was happening, but Mina clearly did not want to go there. Mina's expression when he met her made it easy to picture how awful the place Rana calls home must be, and her words were starting to change because earlier she said she would kill Mina, and now she calls her home. He says the girl's words don't match her actions, so she may be confused. Rana told him to be quiet. Rushing to the boy, she said the last thing they needed was to listen to the girl. She swung her arm and ordered him to disappear. Rita reached out and asked Rana to stop and listen to him. Mina shouted at her sister not to hurt Dad. Rona stopped suddenly and did not attack Red. The girl cried it was unfair. Dropping the dagger, she asked why, and then her vision blurred and she grabbed her head and fell to the ground. Redna asked the girl what was wrong, but she shouted for him to stay away. Rune stepped back and pulled up her hood. The girl's eyes began to change again. Ridity didn't understand what had happened, and the girl's eyes had just changed. Then Mina ran up to the young man. She asked if he was okay. Rida rubbed his hand and told Mina he was mostly okay. He stroked the girl's head and asked if she was hurt. Mina said she was not. Mina blushed and said she was so happy when the boy asked if the girl wanted to become a family. She wanted to be family with him too. Her sister is part of the family, but today she seemed off and was acting oddly. Crying, she begged the young man to save her sister. Rida hugged Mina and said everything was fine and he would think of something. Later that night, Mina slept in bed while the young man sat at the table studying a book and felt he had to do something. Mima remembered that before she met Rada, she had lived with her sister in an underground group, and life there had been very hard. Her skill, called Gift, increased the power of the nearest person, so the organization kept her in chains and forced her to use it on its members every day. Unable to activate the skill on purpose, she quickly lost the organization's interest. Her only purpose was to be a hostage for her sister, who had extraordinary physical abilities and was raised to be an assassin. She was assigned to track down and kill people the organization considered undesirable, and once had to kill a high-ranking member of a rival organization. Although she had enough strength to escape the organization easily, she stayed because Mina was here. If Mina had been alone, Rana could have escaped, but because she was being held hostage, on the day the guards all got drunk, Mina managed to take the keys. At last she broke free from the shackles and escaped. She thought this would stop anything from holding her sister back. She wanted the girl to escape as well. The next day, Rida and Mina left the city as the young man scanned the horizon and said this place would work. He turned to Rana to see if she was there and told her to come out quickly. The surprised girl appeared and Rana grinned, saying the young man had really decided to hand Mina over to her quietly and peacefully. Mina turned to her sister, but Reda interrupted, saying everything was wrong and that he had come today to cure the girl. Rana did not understand what the young man meant. Drawing her blade, she says the boy chose to come and die, and asks if he truly thinks his barrier can withstand her true attack. Rita insisted it wasn't like that, so he would be a little more serious today. The young man summoned the fire spirit, and fireballs appeared across the territory. Rana, very surprised, asked Red what it was. Red said it was simply amazing magic, but it would kill him. Throwing several daggers at Rita, the girl said she would do it before he used them. The boy then uses storage, and all the girl's daggers flying toward him disappear. Runair was very surprised when he read a reply saying it might be a little scary. Rida told the girl to wait a moment, ordered the fireballs to burn the enemy, and then summoned a volley of them. Fireballs begin to attack Rana. Rana grits her teeth and begins to dodge them. A massive volley of fireballs shot toward Rune, struck the ground, and exploded. Dodging, the girl threw her blade at the boy, but he used his storage skill to pull the flying dagger into his inventory. He fired fireballs straight at Rune, and the girl said that since throwing them was useless, she would cut off the boy's head in close combat. Rana suddenly appeared right behind the boy. Mina, holding Red's cloak, called to her sister in fear. Rita glanced back and activated the wind barrier. The ruin struck the seal on the ground. She was shocked to discover the young man had lured her into a trap. A spell hurled her straight into the air. Reda flexed his fists and said he could grab the girl now, then activated another skill, summoned chain shackles, to shackle her. Red caught Rana as she began to fall. Mina sighed with relief, and the girl screamed, begging the young man to let her go immediately. Turning to Mina, she explained what had happened and why the girl had left her. Mina said that wasn't true. Rana said she would take the girl home and kill her. Rita said the girl had tried hard and that everything was fine now. Rana did not understand what the young man was saying. Rated said nothing, activated the seal on his hand, and used a spell to free her from control, placing his hand on the girl's face. Rana remembered the men who had praised her for taking down the leader of that hostile organization. The man took the Rod of Dominion and used it, called the girl Rune Pierce, and commanded her to bring her sister Mina Pierce back home. She must also kill anyone who gets in her way. Reno, frightened, asked what it was. Suddenly her vision blurred. She screamed as the staff in the man's hands shattered. He blamed the runaway girl for losing his precious staff. Pain tore through her, and then her eyes changed color. Some time later, she stood on a rooftop in the city. She smirked and said she had found Mina, and that Mina now needed to be brought home, while Rune's voice warned him not to bring her back home. Writhing in pain again, she kept saying Mina needed to be brought back home, and her eye changed color again. Reddit kept his hand on the girl's face as she began to cry and call for her sister, remembering how mean his smile had been when she stood next to the boy. Just when Rana felt terrible, her second consciousness returned, glad that the girl had already come to her senses. Rana grabbed her head, not understanding what was happening or why she was there, while the other girl saw Rada stroking Mina's head and complained that only Mina was getting attention and it was unfair. A dark aura began to overwhelm her. The girl complained it was not fair at all. Rana's other personality insisted it was not true and warned not to let emotions take over. Mina begged for it to stop because the dark aura was consuming her. It wasn't fair. Rana, watching Mina, knew the control could not be suppressed. Mina pleaded for someone to save her. Tears in her eyes, the girl said she would kill them. At that moment, Rita put his hand on Rana's face. She asked someone for help. Red shouted that he would save the girl right away. The spell kept working. Suddenly, the dark shadow over Rune's eyes began to crack and then fully cracked. Looking up at the sky, the girl saw a bright sun and a smiling Red, and Rana began to cry. Just then Mina called to her. Rana jumped back and told her not to come any closer. Tears in her eyes, she admitted she had said many hurtful things. Mina shouted that everything was fine and that she understood everything completely. Rana asked Mina to forgive her because seeing Mina happy made Rana jealous. Rana wondered why she wasn't happy and then became very angry. Nina ran up to Rana and apologized for running off alone. Rana stroked Nina's head and told her there was no need to apologize. Rana blushed and told her to take care of Mina because she had to go back. Tell her to go back and say Mina is dead or something, and she'll come up with something. Nina panicked and asked her sister, as if she had really said she would come back and think of something. Rita shouted that she couldn't do that and he wouldn't allow it. Rana said she had to, otherwise they'd come and look for them, and that he would figure out how to get rid of them and protect the girls. Rana pressed her lips together and clenched her fist, trembling with fear. Retta had offered to let her live with him and Mina. Mina had told him she wanted them to be a family. Then Rana is part of their family too. The girl smirked and said the boy had suggested something odd. Rita grabs her by the shoulders and says he doesn't care whether he proposed or not, which meant Rana looked happy. That's why he'll make Rana happy. He asks her to join their family. She was shocked and could not say a word. Tears fell when she said she agreed. That meant relying on the young man. Mina threw herself at Rana. The girls embraced and began to cry. Rana apologized to Mina for scaring her. Rita hugged them too and smiled. So the heroes stood in the middle of the field, holding each other. A light breeze tugged at their clothes. Before long, Mino clung to Red's neck, giggling as he called him Daddy, and a friend said he calls Red so affectionately and kindly. The man then asked Rana her name. Rana replied that she was Rana Dixon, Mina's sister, and that she was pleased to meet you. Red turned to Rana. She asked what was wrong, and he said he was wondering what the girl would call him. Luna plays with her fingers, thinks for a moment, then smiles and says she will call him Daddy. The man said it sounded good. Rana said a proposal had already been made, so it could only be called that. The young man was surprised that Rita had proposed to her. Rita denied it, saying the girl wasn't old enough yet. Rana stuck out her tongue and said she'd be old enough next month. Rana then said they should go to the guild already. Retta asked Rana when she had started acting like that. Mina was glad her sister was so cheerful. Watching them, the man said it looked like it would be even more fun now. He laughed with the young man. Sometime later, the heroes went to the Adventurers Guild to report everything to Mrs. Millet. Mrs. Millet told Mina she was very glad Mina had met her sister. Mina thanked her. Rana interrupted and turned to Mrs. Millet. The girl asked Rana what was wrong. She said they would return next month. She suddenly appears before the woman and says they will return to change her status from daughter to wife. Mrs. Millet is surprised and says that's good. Surprised, Rana interrupted him and said the young man himself wanted to make her happy by becoming part of her family, and she agreed. Embarrassed, the girl began to spin around. She then asked whether the young man had really forgotten about it. Mrs. Millet laughed and said she was looking forward to it. With tears in his eyes, Red realized the situation was coming under their control. He asked Miss Millet what she was talking about. A week had passed since Rana and Mina became real sisters, and Red, Mina, and Rana walked down a city street when suddenly Elliot called Red brother, and Tex asked if they were really walking together again. Rita greeted Elliot and Tex. Elliot said people had been hurt during the cleanup and were coming from there. Tex said it had gotten a lot warmer lately, so monsters had come out, and he warned them to be careful. Rana winked and said it was no big deal. Even if they got out, the girl would handle them easily. Rana asked Red if that was true and Red agreed. Tech said that was encouraging. Reddit added that as a parent he couldn't let Rana overdo it. Elliot said Reddit hadn't noticed how energetic Rana was. Grabbing the boy, he said they had to go to a good place for a drink. Redo whispered he would like to, but he didn't know. The thought of his daughters finding out scared him. Rana cut them off and told him to hurry because she was hungry and so was Nina. Elliot hugged himself, trembling, and said he understood everything about the boy. Red laughed nervously and said one was worse than the other. Ellie had said that nothing would hurt her more than Mina, giving him a disapproving look and telling him not to come near her again. Mina called out to Red. Scratching his head, he apologized to the girls and said he was on his way. The young man waved to his comrades and left. Rana walked through the city, approached the young man and asked him what a great place was. Redder even choked. Grabbing his head, he said a friend had mentioned the place had excellent alcoholic drinks. Rana smirked and whispered to Mina while Red was not looking. Mina stepped up to the boy and pulled his cloak. Mina blushed and told Red it was very indecent. The young man was stunned. Mina turned to Rana and asked if that was okay. Rana laughed and patted the girl on the head. Rita said he really wasn't going there. After a while, Mina and the girl were sweeping the yard, wearing long dresses and light scarves over their hair. Rana and the man were preparing food when a girl interrupted them and said she had heard a man named Rita Dixon was staying with them. At that moment, the young man sat at the table in his room, studying a book and practicing magic when he heard a heavy footstep. Mina and Rana walked into the room. The girl said Red had a guest who was a girl. The young man scratched his head and asked who the guest was. Mina said she had forgotten to ask the guest's name. Rin giggled and asked if it could be their dad's ex-girlfriend. Red turned around and said he would be mad, and she laughed and asked if that was true. Red came down from his room. The girl noticed him and brightened when he came down. She had once been a member of Red's group. Reda was stunned when he saw Isha Alro, so he asked what she was doing there, and she sighed, crossed her arms, and told him he had better not ask. After she learned that Gil had kicked the boy out, she also left the Black Wolves. Red was surprised and questioned whether the girl had really done it, since she had only recently joined them. Aisha remembered Gil's telling her that if she wasn't happy with something, she could get lost, and she told the young man she left because of those words. Rana frowned and said the healer would not have been kicked out of the group just like that, and the leader must have had a reason. Rana had an idea and said the boy had been using his hands while talking to girls. Rita turned and said it was nothing like that. Both Noctu and Rosalie liked Gil. Mina asked about Aisha. Aisha blushed and asked if it was really about her. When the girl said Reed had someone there, the young man covered Aisha's mouth, told her to be quiet, and demanded to know why the girl was there. Aisha said she had been traveling alone for a while, but it wasn't profitable. Then she saw the migration sheet, and that led her to Amoros. If she were seriously injured, the losses would be enormous. She joined the civil police here, and now works as the gate guard at a private mansion. It is very good that she stayed. Reda said Aisha is now a guard, and he thinks this is great and that the police pay is steady. Aisha said she wants to give back to the village that raised her when she was an orphan. Smiling, the girl says she heard amazing rumors about the young man. Is it true he killed a dragon in the elven settlement? Rune smiled nervously and asked if she had heard correctly about dragons and elves. Mina smiled and said Dad had tried very hard. Surprised, Aisha said she had already begun to think it was just someone with the same last name, but it turned out to be true. Rita laughed nervously, scratched the back of his head, and said he was just a surprise. Aisha and Rana were taken aback. Aisha folded her arms across her chest, exhaled, and said that unlike Gil, the young man had achieved a lot in 3 weeks. Redder asked if the Black Wolves could not raise their ranks, and Asia said with a straight face that it was nothing like that. Gil and Gilliam turned to banditry and are now wanted. Red was stunned and asked why that happened. Aisha was surprised and said she had been able to talk to Rosalie, who told her she had left the Black Wolves and that Nikto had left them too. Even after Gil and Gilliam kicked out Red, they kept the same tactics and equipment, so they spent a lot on treatment and in the worst case faced the risk of death. Gil was especially reckless and foolish. Attacking the monsters, he said he could handle it without Red. He always shouted he could manage without him. The girls thought the young man was simply obsessed and that he found it hard to admit it. Aisha asked Rosalie if she no longer loved Gil. Rosalie smiled and said she had loved him before, but now he was hopeless. Aisha told Red the story, saying they had to buy healing supplies, and in the end they took out a loan and ran away, which is how they became bandits. Runnies gave a nervous smile, while Mina and Rida froze in shock, and Rida scratched the back of his head and looked quite depressed. He said that, if he remembered correctly, Gil had been a troublemaker for a long time, though always a smiling, kind guy. Mina turned to the young man to somehow cheer him up, but the girl said he could not change anything here, and Aisha agreed. Aisha shifted the subject and said she was curious about something, then looked at Mina and Rana and asked who the cute girls beside him were. Smirking, she said the boy might really have kidnapped them and that she could report it to the police, while Rita shouted that the girl would never think of such a thing. Aisha laughed and said it was only a silly joke, so the boy should not worry. Rana blushed and said he stole her heart. She began to laugh. Aisha said her name is Aisha Alcro and that she is a former member of Red's group. She is very happy to meet Rana and Mina. Mina smiles and introduces herself as Mina Dixon, Red's daughter. Rana winks and introduces herself as Rana Dixon, Mina's sister and Red's wife. Aisha immediately turned to the young man and said she did not understand anything at all, and Retta said that neither of them was her real daughter. Aisha pointed to another girl, said she was very cute, and asked who she was. The girl replied her name was Mailing and she wanted to hear their stories. The man apologized, and Aisha realized Mailing was his daughter. Mina wanted to hear about Red's adventures too, so Aisha asked the boy if he minded, and Red said he didn't, adding that there was nothing interesting about his life as an adventurer. Embarrassed to talk about it himself, he would be very grateful if Aisha helped him. Rana said she would be especially interested in hearing about Red's love affairs, and the young man told Aisha not to talk about them. Aisha said she would start by telling the story of how Rita saved her. The boy felt something was wrong with him. She said it all began when they met. Aisha suddenly shouted that she had completely forgotten why she'd come. Her master had ordered her to find a healer named Rida Dixon and bring him. Rida was very surprised. She said she'd already arranged everything at the guild, and a carriage was waiting outside for them. He needed to go with her right away. Rita didn't understand what she meant or which master she was referring to. After a while, Rita, Mina, Rana, and Aisha were riding in a cart. Rita asked Aisha what business her master had with him that even led them to prepare a cart. Aisha said she didn't know the boy anymore, had only been told to get an order for her, and could only assume the matter was confidential. Mina leaned out of the window and asked Aisha what her master was like. Aisha said he was a little strange. Mina did not understand what Aisha meant. With a smile, Aisha said that if he was considered an aristocrat, he left the family estate and built a city on the border. We are not being asked whether that wasn't great. Aisha added he always went on patrol with the police. He helps the dwarves expand her walls and dwellings. Rana said he seemed very strange. Aisha said she thought he might have met Rida somewhere. After some time, Minasa saw a large mansion. Aisha agreed and said this was the owner's mansion. Before that, she wants to do something. The carriage kept moving, then suddenly stopped, and the heroes did not understand what happened. Rana sighed and said they had guests. Retta asked the girl what she meant. The young man looked out the carriage window and asked what was going on. Suddenly, many people blocked the carriage and ordered the driver to stop. The driver said they were kind because they had truly decided to stop. Holding his sword out, the man told them they might as well be kind enough to die. Aisha drew her weapon and asked whether the man knew whose cart it was and where it was going. The man frowned and said it did not matter to him because there was a healer in the cart. A sudden voice asked whether they really needed a healer. It was Rana, already standing on the carriage roof. She said their answer would be no. Ridu looked surprised, and Aisha began yelling at Rana for doing something dangerous. Suddenly, Rana disappeared from the roof of the cart. A sudden unpleasant sound rang out, and Aisha turned to see Rana standing there, having killed the man who held the sword with her blade. The man collapsed and lost consciousness. Aisha looked stunned and asked what had happened. Runa stood like an innocent child, twirling a curved dagger in her hand. A man stepped up beside her, insulted her, then swung his sword at her. Right then, Rana threw her dagger straight at his neck. The men had no idea who the girl was. All three attacked her at once. Leaping easily, Rana knocked out all three with blows to the backs of their heads, and the other bandits were surprised again as he turned to them with a demonic smile. She tore through the men left and right. Aisha said there was a recent rumor that a very powerful, monster-slaying girl had joined the adventurer police. The girl is a silver-haired blonde with dark skin, so they might have been talking about Rune. Aisha shouted at Rana not to kill them, saying they only needed to be detained and handed over to the police. Rana smiled with her leg over the bandits' neck and said they were simply unconscious. Soon all the bandits were tied up and lying on the ground. Rana ran to Red and smiled like she wanted praise. Mina and the boy patted the girl on the head. Rita said Rana was behaving well but should not overdo it. Rana giggled. Aisha interrupted and said the police would handle the rest and that it was time for them to move on. Rita and the girls climbed into the carriage and set off. The young man spotted the owner's mansion, huge and majestic. Mina called her sister to look at the beautiful view. Rana was very surprised by how many houses filled the city. They also saw the Mastachio dwarf's shop there. Rita told Aisha that they seemed to prefer the city's scenery to the mansion. Aisha laughed and agreed with the young man. After a while, they reach Aisha's master's mansion, where a stately man meets them and greets Mr. Reddickson and the young ladies. Introducing himself as Maisel, the man says he is a butler and invites the guests into the house because the owner is waiting for them. The heroes walked down a long corridor and entered a room with a huge door where a young man and a girl waited, and the young man opened his arms and said he was glad to see Reddickson. The young man says he is the master of the city of Amorta, and his name is Tita Amert Rodenbert. The girl beside him says her name is Gabrielle Rodenbert. Rada shakes the boy's hand, says it's nice to meet him, and gives his name as Rada Dixon. The girls introduce themselves and say their names. They settled onto the sofas. Tita said they had been informed about the incident. Tita and Gabriel bowed. The young man asked the guests to let them apologize first for what had happened. Rana said she was surprised that the nobility bowed their heads to the commoners, since that made them seem important, and she added that Tito was very strange, just as she had been told. Rada asked them politely to lift their heads as they accepted their apologies. Tita smiled and thanked Mr. Reddickson for coming to his estate. The young man seemed kind enough. Then Rita put his hand on his chest and asked Mr. Rodenbert why he invited them to his estate. Smiling, the young man said the guests didn't need to be so formal and could just call him Tita, a name the locals use, and Rita agrees, calling the hero Mr. Tita. Tita's expression turns serious, and he says that before the boy asks his question, they should get straight to the point. He wants the boy to heal his sister Valerie. He says it's better to see once than to hear 100 times, suggests they go through with the others leading, and then Mr. Tita turns to Maisel, who agrees and leads the estate's guests behind him. They head up to the back room of the manor. Mr. Tita says his sister's room is further down the hall. Butler Maisel then asks Rana and Mina to go with him, offers them delicious tea and sweets, and the girls, surprised, ask what he means. Gabriel steps in, sounding confused, and apologizes that this is not something you would want to show little girls. Rana leans back with her hands behind her head and agrees. Mina joins her and wishes her dad luck. The young man waves to the girls. Retta then asked what condition their sister was in. Mr. Tito didn't know what to say, but Gabrielle cut him off and said it happened a year ago. They were at a remote house by the lake, having dinner with the whole family, and everyone was happy, but then a terrible flame burst from her body. Mr. Tito said she looked like she was engulfed in flames, but the burns left her in a coma that has now lasted a year. Rana asked whether a doctor had examined the girl, and Mr. Tita sighed that she had been seen by doctors, and that even healers from the capital had come, but were powerless. Recently, Mr. Tita learned that an unusual healer had appeared at the Adventurers Guild. Afterward, he knocks on his sister Valerie's door and tells her they are going to her room. Rita steps into the room first. He apologizes to Mrs. Valerie for intruding. The girl lies quietly on the bed. A young man was stunned by what he saw. A fragile girl lay on a huge bed, and two companions stood beside her. At first, a young man might have thought she looked like she was sleeping peacefully. Gabrielle then approached, took the blanket, and asked Valerie to forgive her. The girl pulls back the blanket and treats Valerie's burned body. Valerie was wearing very light nightclothes that barely touched her skin so as not to injure the burns. Retta asked Mr. Tidd to examine her. Mr. Tidd agreed. Retta approached the girl and apologized to her. Rhett Atkinson says he came to heal her. The young man wondered whether these were really burns because there was no inflammation on her body. Touching the dark spot, he channels healing magic. The boy thinks they might be scars, then the dark spots vanish. Surprised, Retta wondered if it was enough, and he could not understand why the others had not been able to heal her yet. The young man suddenly notices the dark spots shrinking again. The healed area is covered in dark spots again. Mr. Tita put a hand on his head and said that's just how it was. Healing had no effect here, and Gabrielle sighed that no one could figure out what kind of burns these were. Rada struggled briefly and said her body suddenly caught fire. It resisted treatment, and the wounds on her body did not heal. These aren't simple burns or any runes. They were created artificially. The young man thinks he should try something. A magical seal forms on his hand. Sliding it across his face, he activates a detection skill. A seal forms on his eye. Mr. Tita asked the boy why he used the detection skill, and Redia agreed, saying adventurers often use this basic magic to detect traps or identify objects. Concentrated magic in a place appears blue. Blessed things appear white. This is like an aura. Seeing Valerie's aura, the young man noticed it was black. Black meant a curse. Rita realized she was cursed. Mr. Tito was shocked and asked whether she was really cursed, but he could not understand why it had happened. Gabrielle was very afraid for Valerie. Mr. Tita swayed, put a hand to his face, and did not know what they should do next. Gabriel suggests they go to the capital's Healers Guild for advice. Mr. Tita tells the girl she is right, but asks what healers can do about the curse. Weta cut them off and asked Mr. Tita to wait. The young man, distracted, apologizes to Rita and says he will definitely pay for his services. Retta says cautiously that the young man insists he doesn't mean that, and that he only just learned the spell and hasn't used it yet. Confidently, the young man asks Mr. Tid if he could try casting a curse removal spell. Surprised, Mr. Tada grabbed Red by the shoulders and asked whether he really had that magic. The boy agreed. Mr. Red agreed and asked the boy to use it. Redia stepped up to Valerie and admitted he didn't know if the spell would help, but until specialists from the capital arrived, he would try to ease the girl's suffering. Gabriel and Tita held hands and looked at the young man with hope. Redis stretched out his arms and closed his eyes. Calling on the spirits of light, he ordered them to banish the evil force. The young man opened his eyes and cast a spell to remove the curse. A huge glowing magic seal appeared beneath the girl, and a bright sphere formed in her hands. At that moment she felt surrounded by a fierce flame, and she cried because she was unbearably hot and wrapped in darkness. Tears streamed as Valerie wondered if she'd heard someone's voice, but she couldn't see or hear anything, couldn't tell how long she'd been there, and begged someone for help because she felt very hot. Above the flame, the dark space suddenly cracked and split, and the girl saw it. She woke up in the real world, cowering and screaming for her brother to help because she was suddenly extremely hot, and Mr. Cheetah shouted that Valerie had woken up. Retta told Mrs. Valerie everything was fine. He was slowly lifting the curse. Frightened, the girl asked who he was. The main character said his name was Retta Dixon and that he was a healer. Nearby, her brother Tid and sister Gabrielle hugged each other and watched everything, and she smiled with relief. Tito watched in surprise as Valerie's dark spots began to fade. She sat on her bed holding Red's clothes while the young man finished his spell. Tears and a smile came to Gabrielle's face as the spots on the girl's body faded. At that moment, Red told Mrs. Valerie to hold on and promised he would do everything he could. Smiling, the girl agrees and says she will try. The young man continued to use his magic. Mrs. Valerie was about to speak to Rita, but suddenly screamed in pain again. Rita saw it getting harder and his mana running out. He feared he couldn't cope and finish the purification. A strange aura surrounds the young man, making him feel he cannot stop, and a devastating feeling fills him as a very bright light forms between him and Valerie. Red flared from the last of the mana, and the bright light formed a vortex that whipped their hair and clothes, so Lord Tita and Gabriel covered their faces against the glare. Tata couldn't tell what the bright light was. After a while, the light faded, and Reddit and Valerie were sitting on the bed. We returned to Mrs. Valerie, and he was about to say something, but the girl interrupted him and said everything was fine. The young man began to fall and said he couldn't do it anymore. He fell right into Mrs. Valerie's lap. The crowd felt a little embarrassed. Mr. Tita asked how she felt. She stroked Red's head and said she was fine thanks to Mr. Red. Retta plunges into memories of Nikto, telling the young man he must learn to control the mana in his body, and the young man thinks about it. Using the wind cutter, he sliced the monster. Nekta told the boy he had done everything correctly. She compared it to alcohol and said a young man must learn to control it so nothing extra spills. If you pour too much, the glass will overflow, the alcohol will spill, and the bottle will be empty. Smiling, the young man understood what the girl was saying. Nick used magic to show the boy what she meant. The girl called on the spirits of flame. She warned that compressing magic would release something terrible. Again, she summoned the flame spirits and used them against the enemies, blowing up the area. Red was terrified then. Gil then asked Nato whether she and Rada truly wanted to kill them, or to wipe out the goblins entirely. Nukito asked the young man if he understood. Red smiled and said he would try to remember her words. Nikto agreed, saying she was sure he could handle it. Reda touched his head and asked if it was a dream. He said he lost control and apparently blacked out, and still can't cope with the training he received earlier. Mr. Tita suddenly turned and wished the young man a good morning. Mr. Tita sat in a chair beside the bed, reading a book. The young man said Reda had finally woken up. He was surprised. He turned and saw Mr. Teed getting up to apologize for using their bed. Tita told the boy not to worry because the boy had saved his sister, and Mr. Tita was now declared dead. The boy added that Valerie had been tested with detection and the curse had lifted. Rada said he was glad to hear that, then asked Mr. Tid where his daughters were, and Mr. Tid said Mina and Rana were in the bathroom because Valerie had insisted. Gabrielle warned Valerie to be careful because Valerie had just recovered. Valerie agreed and thanked her sister. The girls stepped into the bathroom and looked surprised, and Mina smiled as she said the bathtub was very large. At this point, Aisha shook her head and said she did not belong there because she was still on duty and everyone was packed together. Valerie turned to Aisha and said she had heard that Aisha and Mr. Rita had traveled together before. Aisha agreed, frightened. At first, Rana thought it was fine if it was Ms. Gabriella, but now Valerie was calling Dad by his first name and she felt very uneasy. Valerie said the bat felt very nice and made her feel wonderful. Rana agreed. Aisha interrupted and asked Valerie why she had called them all. Rana felt scared and wondered why Aisha had asked her. Valerie smiled and said she had a reason, because she wanted to ask the girls about Red. Gabriella looked surprised and said this was really it. Valerie felt embarrassed and agreed it was love at first sight. Rana was beside herself with rage. Rana told Mrs. Valerie she was from the aristocracy. The girl believed she should not fall in love with her commoner father. Valerie said everything was fine, and Gabriel added that, as a reward, Tita was even willing to marry her to him, but the girl stopped her. Rana said nervously that such stories are common, where a woman falls for her healer and then suffers. Nina came to her senses and said it was the same situation, but it involved Rana. The girl jumped up and asked Mina whose side she was on. Smiling sweetly, she said she was on her dad's side. Valerie smirked and said everything was clear now, so to avoid regrets later they should tell her about Red. Minus pointed out fact 1 that Dad is very kind, and Aisha noted fact 2 that Rida has always been kind, though he was hard to rely on before and now seems quite popular. Rana suggested fact 3, but admitted she didn't know and thought it might be kind. Valerie said that after hearing that feedback she immediately wanted to be their mother. The girl reached out and said she was counting on Mina and Rana. Rana saw the girl as someone who declares war. Squeezing Valerie's hand tightly, she said the girl had asked for it. Valerie laughed nervously. Aisha wondered if she had understood everything correctly. Redo walked with Mr. Tita and said the master had helped him cool down. Tita laughed and said he was proud of his hot spring. The young man asked if the girls were still in the bathroom. Tita suggested he have a drink for now. Red agreed. A short time later, 2 girls came in and told Mom and Dad they were home. Tata, Gabrielle, and Valerie greeted them. Suddenly, the girls were surprised to find Valerie there. They asked her how she woke up and how she felt. Valerie said she was fine now. The butler caught his eye and said the girls should greet the guests first. They approached Red, Mina, and Rune. The blonde setter was Oro Amort, and the dark-haired girls was Nero Amort. Tida told Retta that these were his daughters. They planned to open a school this spring and were visiting to try things out. Rita said he was very happy to meet the girls, and Tide said school was great. Gabrielle then interrupted and said they would finish greetings and move on to dinner. After a while, everyone sat down at a large table. Valerie offered Mr. Reed a taste of the meat. He thanked her for her concern. Rana told him he couldn't eat only meat and should eat vegetables, and the young man agreed and thanked Rana. Valerie warned Mr. Rada that the dry food would dry out his throat and advised him to drink some wine. He apologized to her. He stared at Mr. Tid, trying to make sense of what was happening, and Tid could not understand how it had come to this. Mina said they get along very well. Then Valerie apologized for bringing it up during dinner and said she needed to talk to her brother. Mr. Tita asks the girl what happened. Valerie said that before she gets married, she would like to date Rita, so Rita asks her brother if he objects. Redder froze in surprise and asked the girl what she meant. Rana sprang up and glared at her. Thinking of Valerie openly voicing her desires, Rana refused to let her interfere. Rana felt embarrassed and told Valerie that Rida had already proposed to her and asked whether Valerie was sure yet, and Rida felt scared and told Rana he had not said that as a proposal. Valerie said she decided to ask permission precisely because her rival was so cute. Mr. Tita said he was not against it, but Rida's real opinion is unclear because he says he knows nothing about Valerie, is not the best companion, and is over 30. Valerie began to cry and asked what they should do after Mr. Reda rejected her. Reda said he did not mean that. Rana said the boy had her, but Reda shouted that Rana was actually his daughter. Mr. Tita interrupted and said that in that case they should be friends first. Then he asked Rita what he thought. Red said he was not against friendship and would consider it an honor, and Rana said there was no need for that. Tita tells the boy she will entrust Valerie to him in that case. The boy agrees. Valerie then remembers something. Gabriel turns to her and asks what is wrong. Valerie said she thought of something. If Retta becomes her friend, her brother won't be lonely and will have a friend. Mr. Tito was surprised and shouted that he wasn't lonely. The next day, everyone came out of the house to thank Red for the visit and dinner, and the Amort children said goodbye to Mina, promising they would see each other again. We would have followed as they set off, Rana considered the curse. Removing curses is rare even among healers, and those who can do it are called messengers of God. The spell places a heavy strain on the caster. Rana has heard that such curses are lifted in a few days or even weeks. Even if they did everything using Mina's blessings, it would have taken them at least half a day, and in the worst case, nothing would have happened. The same fireball she had seen earlier, when Red cast a spell, left the girl wondering who this really was. Mina leaned toward Rana and saw her sister as if floating in the clouds. Rana smiled, came back to herself, and said she realized how incredible their daddy was. Mina cheered and lifted her hands slightly, smiling broadly as she agreed with her older sister and said their father was something special. Hugging Mina and stroking her head, Rana said she was as amazing as her father. Mina laughed loudly while Rana kept smiling, completely calm. Redel had been warm and kind when he saved her, and she remembered that day clearly. Mrs. Valerie felt the same and began flirting with him at dinner. 2 days later, when they were already home, a blonde girl appeared at the door. It was Valerie. She smiled and asked if Mr. Redo was home now. Rana noticed the girl with Valerie right away from how off-balance she looked, turned, kept her emotions in check, and asked what Mrs. Valerie was doing here. Valerie smiled wider and swept her hand to the side to point somewhere just as Mr. Tita entered with his hand bandaged and said he was slightly hurt. In the master's room, Radam managed to heal him. The healed man asked how Tito had come to this, and the other man said he had decided to teach the thugs who attacked the healer a lesson. Valerie kept turning and staring at Red's room. The healer himself asked Tid and surprise whether they had found out anything interesting about the bandits. The moment Tata began his story, screams came from the first floor. One was an adult man demanding a doctor be brought to him immediately, speaking brazenly. Redder realized someone wanted to see him and began to wonder who the man with terrible manners was. Then he turned to Tita and told him to go outside. Red walked down the stairs slowly, calling for Riggs. The healer wanted to know what had happened while Riggs was treating Mr. Tid. Without warning, an object shot toward Red. The healer ducked to the side and avoided it. It was some kind of glass container with liquid. It hit the wall and splashed onto the floor. Rana stared ahead, dumbfounded. Several men stood before him. One of them shouted, pointed at Red, demanded to know if he was really a healer, and told him to come over and heal him immediately. Redia asked why he should obey. One of the insolent man's escorts shouted at Redia not to speak that way to Munza. Munza LG owns the largest trading company, named after his family. Munza studied the healer closely, assessing his status. The other man accused Munza of corruption, and Munza, furious, ordered Reda to begin treatment immediately, saying he did not care about the cost and was willing to endure any pain. Renault stepped up to the man and said they'd discuss payment later. The healer asked to see the wounds the merchant wanted healed. Munza began to open his cloak. The man removed his outer clothing and tossed it aside. Everything beneath his clothing was covered in black spots. Only his head, shoulders, and neck remained unharmed. They were red, and I thought they were burns. Mansa kept rushing the healer, saying 2 of their healer guilds had already examined him before he came, and that the healers in this city seemed incompetent. He hoped Rita could cope. The healers said she suffered the burns a couple of evenings ago. The merchant's assistant confirmed it. It all came on them suddenly. Afterward, the assistant asked if Rhonda could help his master. Rhonda fell silent and thought it over. It seemed he understood why Munza had been wounded. Reed began to remember a theory he'd studied in books a few years earlier. The crush removal spell, if it had worked correctly, was supposed to work like this. Rita told the trading company's owner the curses were made to rebound to the caster if dispelled. Munza looked up, surprised. The assistant shouted immediately that Redo was being disrespectful, saying a healer had no right to act that way or mock their boss, and then the girl spoke.